Up here. All right, so we're gonna bring this meeting back to order, and we've already opened the meeting and just came out of an executive session. So we are ready to jump in our ambitious agenda today, and we are going to begin with announcements. Do we have any announcements?
Or swearing in.
Yes.
Do we have any swearing in?
We do.
Oh, that's why Lindsay's here, of course. All right.
Are you going to do that first, swearing in? Well,
Yes.
Judy, are you going to be
Yes.
able to get up the,
Yeah, let me do the swearing in. So is it-
Do you have both?
no, I asked if she
Must
could
be
do it.
7 o'clock?
I don't care which one it is. Up on there. So you can see her.
Kickoff meeting on the 25th.
Oh, this is just the general.
That's the generic.
Cool, all right. So I'm just gonna do it right here, all right? So if you want to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly affirm
I solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and will obey the laws of the United States
and will obey the laws of the United States
and of the state of Ohio,
and of the state of Ohio,
that I will in all respects
that I will in all respects
observe the provisions of the Charter
observe the provisions of the Charter
and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
the Human Relations Commission.
the Human Relations Commission.
Welcome aboard. Okay, Mary Ann, kick off those announcements.
Yes, there's one announcement that I want to make about the there it is, okay. On September 25th, which is a Wednesday, the Comprehensive Plan Update is having a kickoff meeting. This is a time for everyone in the village to come and find out about, well, one, what a comprehensive plan is, and how important it is to the future of our village and how people can be involved. So that is September 25th at 6:30 at Mills Lawn Auditorium. And probably, do we know how long it'll be? Maybe an hour, hour and a half, something like that?
I'd give it 2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay, so plan on, and do we know if there's childcare?
I doubt it, unless that's specifically arranged, usually it's
Okay.
noted.
Yeah, so, I mean, one way we've done it in the past is we've reached out to the high school, because the students have done it with their community service hours.
Uh-huh.
So, we could try.
All right. So Judy, is that something,
I
You
can
would
certainly give it
see
a
if
whirl,
that-
absolutely.
and then we could announce that if that's
Yep.
possible. Okay, so then I have two other announcements, and one is for Patty Bates. I thought she might like to do it, and Lisa, I thought you might like to do the World House Choir.
You bet, it's fair.
So, Patty, you want to come up and,
We have a tentative planting date for the Community Food Forest, my legacy project, that is going in at the small green space at Xenia and Allen. The tentative planting date is October 13th. That's dependent upon the delivery of the planting stock. So we're looking for volunteers for that, to help. If you're available that day, we'll be able to confirm that date by the next council meeting. But if you would like to volunteer to help us, please, we need a lot of people, we've got a lot of stuff to plant. You can contact Macy Reynolds, and Macy will add your name to the volunteer list, and then we'll make sure that somebody gets back to you with more details once we confirm the date and the time.
Great.
and so should people come to that, does that have a name, that place, or will it have a name?
Everybody just calls it the Xenia Allen Park. It's not really a park,
Xenia.
it's just a small green space. But yeah, you could, that's where you should come. There's not parking alongside the road, so you would have to park elsewhere and then walk up there. So it's on a Sunday, so there are some business offices right down there by Dollar General that will be closed. And that's really close. It's like a block up the street. So,
Great,
thanks.
thanks.
Thanks, Patty. Lisa?
World House Choir? Well, I'm not at World House Choir dress rehearsal right now, but I'm very excited to announce a collaboration between the World House Choir and the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, DCDC, doing a series of concerts that are called Our Planet, Our Lives. We'll be doing a major work by Paul Winter that's called the Misa Gaia. It's a mass form, a mass to the earth. It's got a small orchestra. We'll have the dancers. It has like whale and wolf noises. It's a really magical piece of music. And then also the World House Choir has requisitioned 2 original works that we'll be also presenting. There's 2 concerts in Yellow Springs. The first one is this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. The second concert in Yellow Springs is on Saturday, September 21st, also at 7 p.m. They'll have, if you want to see the World House Choir in Yellow Springs, those of you who come to our concerts know that you need to get there really, really early. We turned away, I think, 75 people a night last season. So the good news is Thursday night, the 19th, we're performing at the Levitt Pavilion. And if you haven't been to the Levitt Pavilion, it is totally cool. All these are free, and then also on the 22nd, we're performing at High Street Methodist in Springfield. So there's options at larger venues than the Foundry Theater. So we hope to see you. It's going to be really special. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, so I believe, Greta, you're here for an announcement. Come on up.
May I approach to deliver these?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here this evening, Village Council members. My name is Dr. Greta Mayer, and I'm CEO of the Mental Health and Recovery Board for Clark, Greene, and Madison counties. And I'm pleased to share with you our fiscal year 2018 annual report, which was just recently released. And I just wanted to point out a few sections and familiarize you with who we are and what we do. We're one of 50 boards like us across the state who is charged with, statutorily, to plan, develop, fund, empower, and manage and evaluate the public behavioral health system, mental health and addiction services for kids all the way through adulthood. And the purpose of why we exist is to connect residents with the care community. And we provide pathways to care for mental health and substance use services, and we facilitate quality care. We contract with local providers who meet certain standards of care that deliver that care then to the individuals and families. And the resources that we fund, we use local property tax revenue. So in Greene County, there's a property tax that goes to mental health and addiction that comes to us that we administer and contract back out to the community with those clinical care providers, from housing to all kinds of individual counseling and case management support. So the resources we provide are local tax, levy revenue dollars, as well as we can draw down state and federal dollars to also support the efforts. So the funding and resources provide prevention services. You may think of school-based prevention to help kids stay healthy and well. It could be treatment services that occur in the community or at agencies, or supportive services, like I mentioned, employment support, coaching, job coaching, housing, those kinds of services. On the inside cover, you'll see a letter from me to the community just outlining and further describing those prevention, treatment, and recovery support services. Some of the initiatives that we've done since the end of the fiscal year of 18, so what's happened since then. So updates on that. And below the letter is a little blurb about how we have board members and how important that is. Our Greene County commissioners appoint half of the Greene County members that serve on our Mental Health and Recovery Board, and then our state department, the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, appoints the other half. So the 3 counties that we serve appoint board members who must be residents of those communities for Clark, Greene, and Madison counties. So it's important for us, and we value that local voice and representation. On the inside right, you'll see a very important graphic about the funding. I mentioned how we rely, 70% or so of our dollars are that local revenue dollars, so those are really critical. And to have community members that support the need is crucial. And you'll notice, again, how important prevention dollars are and the return on the investment when we are able to invest in prevention, and we're going after state and federal dollars to increase the support for prevention, so we're hoping there'll be more of that coming forward. And below the financial description is a very important kind of picture, and what that shows is all the community partners. And while we contract with care providers that deliver the clinical and supportive services or prevention services, we work with a whole host of other important groups like education, K-12 and higher ed, criminal justice. Chief Carlson's in the room, and actually he was a critical part on Friday. We were at Antioch Midwest all last week to help support training law enforcement officers, and Chief Carlson was on our planning committee, and dedicated Florence Randolph, also the social worker that's on the department. They contributed a lot of support and guidance to make that a success. So we graduated 37 police officers. It was right here in Yellow Springs, 40 hours of training, and again, we have local law enforcement officials guide the process. So it's not just behavioral health people wanting to do good work in the community, but also working hand in hand with law enforcement to make sure that the skills and abilities that we're hoping to build in officers are really practical and what the residents and communities need. So criminal justice is a key partner, and your chief has been very supportive of the efforts, and we appreciate that partnership. So I just wanted to let you know. On the back side is just an overview of those formal contracts that we have with the providers across Clark, Greene, and Madison counties. So those contract care providers are the ones that they are the deliverers of the prevention, treatment, and recovery support services. So while we work with lots of other groups to accomplish our mission and reduce stigma, get people to seek help sooner rather than later, those are all the agencies, the face of the services that you'll run into in the community. So you may want to keep that handy and pass that along to someone who may need support, or a referral you could provide for family and friends. And at the bottom are crisis numbers too, so you may want to check that out, including a crisis text line, which we see has been utilized very well to get people the help they need from that kind of mode. So I don't know if you have any questions for me. I know I gave a quick overview. I'd be happy to
I have
answer.
two quick questions.
Yes.
On the total board expenses circle chart, what's supportive?
That's a great question. We lump a lot of things into that. I'll tell you, the things that you may think of off the bat are housing. So if people don't have a safe place to live, how in the world can we expect them to recover from a severe mental illness or addiction? But so some of the services, so we own properties. There's a property here in Yellow Springs that we own as a board, and then the agency operates it, TCN Behavioral Health, to provide supportive services, checking in on those residents, like a group home type facility. So those are properties we have over 22 throughout the 3 counties that we help, again, contribute support for to uphold so that people can stay healthy and well.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, another one is peer support. So individuals who are on the healthy side of recovery can then help others to get into recovery. So that's something else we fund through supportive services.
Thank you. I also notice in the system partners, you talk about sharing data and a common agenda. And the Village of Yellow Springs is in the late stages of doing a Yellow Springs health assessment, health conceived broadly, right?
Yes.
In collaboration with Dr. Sharon Sherlock, who's been the executive director of Reach Out. And one of the challenges that we've had is finding, 45387 specific data, kind of disaggregated from the larger pools of county data.
Yes.
So I just wanted to plant that seed. If there's any 45387 specific data that you might share with us anonymized, it would help our health assessment.
Absolutely, we would be happy to do that, and those are the kinds of data sharing,
Yeah,
exactly,
I saw that.
activities
It's
we're
like-
doing. Yes.
Great.
So I'd be happy. Who would be the right person to
Me.
follow up? Okay, great.
Great.
I'll get your name, thank you.
Did you have something, Marion? Yeah, I just wanted to comment, nice report, and also, I love seeing NAMI here, because actually NAMI was a seed planted through the Human Relations Commission.
That gives me goosebumps, that's really great.
It's really exciting.
right.
And,
The
just to
leadership's
see
there.
it now be 3 counties, so thanks for what you do.
Yeah, Catherine Hitchcock and Donna Sorrell have done an
Yep.
amazing job, so we're very appreciative.
All right, anything else?
If you'd like to give me your card, I can just email you. That might be easier.
Yeah, I will look and make sure I have one. I might not, but I will write down my info.
Thank you.
I might have given them all away.
Thanks, Greta.
I've got your contact
Great,
information.
wonderful.
Thanks,
you.
Judy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Couple more announcements. I want to thank the organizers of Yellow Springs Porch Fest. What an amazing day on Saturday. Yeah, so nice, so great to be out there. And it really kind of made me think about our signature events, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, YS Pride, Street Fair. And I really think that Porch Fest, I mean, what an amazing way to give something to the community. So,
Oh, I just thought of another announcement that I have, but I can wait
Okay.
until you're done.
So a couple other quick things. The McKee Group has a meeting on September 25th. So September 25th is going to be a busy day, 11:30 at AUM, and I'm going to be talking about the charter amendments. So everyone's welcome. We also have a meeting for the temporary transportation project on that same day at 9 a.m. We know the comp plan meeting is that evening at 6:30 p.m. And then my last, I guess, comment, and you already heard it, Josue, but I'm going to mention it again. The parking donations have the smallest footprint I've ever seen. You know, if we can think about a way to make that parking donations thing work, that'd be great. I'm glad that we have started, but yeah, it took me 15 minutes to find one of them, actually. So it was good to get my steps in, but yeah. So, yeah, I want to keep working on that. Okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I know that we talk about commission stuff at the end, but I think that sometimes we lose our viewers in really long meetings. So I want to comment that the Economic Sustainability Commission is interested in talking to community members in Yellow Springs who live in Yellow Springs, but for whatever reason have their own, founded a business and it's elsewhere. We're really interested in hearing the insights on how they made the choices, what were their reasons for going outside of Yellow Springs, what were their barriers to be in Yellow Springs. So if there's anybody that fits that bill of living locally and running a business elsewhere, would you please reach out to Judy Kintner, and she'll connect you to Economic Sustainability Commission. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, next up, we need to talk about the consent agenda. And actually, I'm going to pull it off because I have one suggestion on the minutes. I want to make sure in the discussion part about the local solar rate that it is clear that the ordinance does provide for a reevaluation each year of that rate. So what I read, what did it say?
Bottom of page 2, is that where you're looking?
Yeah. It made it sound like it would be up to us, but it actually is part of the ordinance that we passed. So, yeah, where it says right to revisit. So if we can just change that to,
The ordinance guarantees the option to?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
Okay.
I have a change. It was during the boards and commission review. The minutes read that I suggested disbanding some commissions as a possibility. That might have come across certainly as a possibility, and I think it is, but I think what would capture my thoughts and feelings more was that I was talking about combining some so that the work does not get lost. But we might have to combine missions or combine people from one commission to another to make sure, again, that those missions stay forward. But we can't, if we can't populate all of them, because we don't have enough people. So disbanding might be an aftermath, but the primary mission is to combine.
Yep, okay,
Okay,
I can
thanks.
rewrite that.
Thanks.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as revised?
I move we approve as revised.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Review of the agenda. Anything we need to change, add, modify? Okay. Then, Mary Ann, petitions and communications?
Okay, 2 we've already handled with Patty Bates and Lisa Krieger. There was a In the petitions and communications, there was a photograph of the new VITA Award at the Sunflower Field. There was a letter from Judith Hempfling concerned about the Miguel Espinozo traffic stop. Emily Seibel sent a letter, Home Inc. newsletter. Canetta sent an article that featured Home Inc.'s most recent rental facility that was in a national housing magazine. And let's see, the photograph of several notable people at the Friends Care 50th celebration. And Elise Burns sent the mayor's report regarding eligible charges and what went to mayor's court, what didn't, why it didn't, et cetera.
All right, thanks, Mary Ann. Let's move into legislation, and we have our third and final reading of ordinance 2019-31. Judy, let's read that in by title only.
Indeed, this is repealing and replacing Section 1064.02, rates, admission, and season hours of Chapter 1064 Municipal Swimming Pool of Part 10 Streets, Utilities, and Public Services of the codified ordinances of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio.
All right, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, so it's the third reading, so I'm going to make sure that I open the public hearing. And we have been working on this all summer, and I feel like we came to a good decision and ultimately a way to kind of balance everyone's interests. Josue, do you want to say anything more about the?
No, other than we're following up on the questions that were asked the last council meeting about ensuring the information gets to every user on what options are available to them on financial assistance. So we looked at that and we'll be promoting those programs. So
Great.
everything that was asked about last council session, we believe that we can follow up on data capturing, who the users are, and follow up with referral programming.
Yeah, and then I'll just say that, part of what we did a lot, or worked on this a lot, was to make sure we had the right data to figure out how to balance the fact that pool rates had not been increased for 10 years. The pool's operated at a loss, and we understand it's a community asset. But the approach that we've come up with will try to maintain low rates for residents and shift most of the increases to non-residents. Ultimately, we have programs that Josue mentioned, like Swim for All, to make sure that everybody can enjoy the pool. So, any other questions or comments from council members? Questions or comments from citizens? Megan?
Megan Bachman, I just want to thank you for taking the time and care with this discussion and getting the data and really thinking it through. I've used the pool quite a bit this summer, and I bet it's one of the more diverse places in this community, and so keeping it accessible is really important, and I thank you for doing that.
Thanks a lot, Megan. And thanks for your sharp questions as
Yes.
well. It definitely helped get us to where we are. Any other comments? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Judy, if you could call the roll, please.
Indeed. Stokes.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. All right. Next up, we have Resolution 2019-41, and Judy, I'd appreciate if you could read that in full.
All right, this is supporting access improvements proposed for Glen Helen by the Glen Helen Ecology Institute of Antioch College. Whereas council has received a request from the Glen Helen Ecology Institute of Antioch College for support of their application to the State of Ohio Public Works Commission to fund access improvements to Glen Helen Nature Preserve located at 1075 State Route 343 within the Village of Yellow Springs. And whereas the access improvements would replace the parking area previously available off State Route 343 and provide a public restroom for visitors, plus a gatehouse for staffed access to the site. And whereas the improvements would allow persons of limited mobility to have increased access to Glen Helen, including the Cascades of Birch Creek and the Yellow Spring. And whereas the parking area would provide access to the Clifton Connector mixed-use path, currently under consideration by multiple parties, including the Village of Yellow Springs. And whereas the proposed improvements will allow Glen Helen staff to better accommodate the 100,000-plus visitors and villagers who journey to the Glen Helen annually. And whereas Village Council has reviewed this request for support of the application and determined that is consistent with the interests of the Village of Yellow Springs regarding pedestrian access to natural areas, support for tourism and economic development, and improving accessibility options for persons of limited mobility. Now therefore, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, Council hereby supports the request for access improvements to Glen Helen by the Glen Helen Ecology Institute of Antioch College.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right, Nick Budis.
Hi, Nick Budis, Director of Glen Helen. Thank you for considering this resolution. The Ohio Public Works Commission runs the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, and we've used Clean Ohio for a number of projects within Glen Helen, including the acquisition of the Sutton Farm from the Village of Yellow Springs several years ago. One of the things that they make allowance for is funding access improvements to properties that they've previously protected through conservation easements. And with that in mind, we're interested in pursuing a project that's been on the mental books for a long time, which is providing a better way for folks, including folks with limited mobility, to access the part of the Glen that is east of Birch Creek. And regularly, nearly monthly or thereabouts, I hear from folks who tell me that they love Glen Helen, that they can no longer visit it because they can't get down the long stone steps. And we're interested in creating a way that that restores accessibility to the preserve. The previous lot that was there needed to be closed. It was too far down into the Glen, too close to the Yellow Springs, too close to the natural areas of the Glen, and too far from an area that the county sheriff's office was able to help us secure. The new plan was, when we contemplated the conservation easement, carved out as a building envelope in contemplation that we might do this when we had the capacity to do it, and includes amenities such as a gatehouse that would allow us to ensure that after hours that this is a place that wouldn't become a vector for troublesome behavior. Happy to answer any questions that council might have. Just one other thing that I should mention is that the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, in providing us with this opportunity to seek public support for funding, requests that we demonstrate that it is the local support of at least 2 communities. Miami Township has already provided a letter of support, and we'd be grateful if the council would approve that as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to comment, on the fact that I appreciate the support that you've given in evaluating the, Yellow Springs Clifton Connector, which also emphasizes accessibility, and the Glen team and Antioch College for that. I mean, I think from my perspective, this is clearly, part of what we want to help facilitate. Any other questions or comments?
Well, thank you for doing this. I remember when the parking lot was a parking lot, and I know why it was closed, but it'll really make a difference. It'll make a difference. I can take my granddaughter there more easily, because I don't think she's going to be able to walk down those steps. But I know it'll really make a difference for a lot of people to be able to get in there and see the Glen. Thanks.
Any other comments? All right. So,
Thank you.
Nick, thank you so much. Any questions or comments from villagers? All right. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Awesome. Okay. We'll make sure you get a signed copy of that. Okay. So, last piece of legislation is Resolution 2019-42, and Judy, we can do that by title only.
Thankfully. Okay, this resolution is accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right. Josue, is this you?
This is.
Oh, Judy,
This
okay.
is me, because this is a very housekeeping kind of thing. You may recall that you approved a resolution, you passed a resolution approving the budget, which Colleen brought to you. Colleen then submits that resolution and budget to the county auditor, who then certifies that, sends us back the amounts and rates, and says, council, now is this in keeping with what you sent us, and you check it over and ensure that in fact it is, which Colleen has done, then once this is passed, it goes back to the county auditor, and you're just locked in for your budget.
All right.
I do have one comment on the form itself. It must have been from about 100 years ago.
We have this comment every single year, and it has never, ever changed, no matter how
Never been
much
able
we
to get rid of
comment.
all the misters.
I change it every time I send it back, and we always make that comment, but apparently
And they always send back misters.
they do. They do.
So you would think that there never were any women on village council.
Well, actually, we've usually had a majority of women on village council, so, yeah, all right. Well, let's comment again.
We always do.
Yes. Any other questions or comments from council? I do want to highlight one of the things that this emphasizes that I've mentioned a couple times about the operating levy, which will, this last 5 years will end in 2020. Again, it's very important, I think, to have this on the ballot in the spring, which means that we want to make sure that we are providing good information to the community about what the operating levy does in terms of providing services and all the great reasons why Yellow Springs is everyone's favorite place. So, we've done this in the past. We have a good model with what Melissa Dodd did formerly, but that is important to, I guess, prioritize. Okay. Any questions or comments from community members? All right. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thanks, Judy. All right. We are moving into special reports, and Ron Lewis, if you don't mind coming up to the mic, and I want to thank you again for taking some time to be with us today. First, why don't you kind of open up
Yes.
why we invited Ron today?
Yes, thank you, Ron, for joining us today. If council and the audience recall past two council sessions, we've had several questions regarding the law enforcement and prosecution in Yellow Springs. What are our protocols? What are our procedures? Other references to the use of the mayor's court, the work that's gone into the use of the mayor's court and identifying which activities come before the mayor's court. So as a follow-up to all those questions that have been brought before the council, we thought it would be good to bring in our Greene County Prosecutor, Ron Lewis, on his input and insights on our law enforcement practices in Yellow Springs and the prosecution of those practices. So Ron Lewis, thank you for joining us today. It's,
Thank you for
great to
inviting
have
me, I appreciate that. I have two handouts if I can approach the council, that I wanted to give you to review. Let me get one of those back. I highlighted some things on there, and if I'm not completely within the lines, coloring is not my forte. What I've handed you are two things that I think are very relevant when it comes to the discussion of mayor's court. First of all, let me say, first and foremost, I support mayor's court. And I have tried to work with the mayor and the clerk in her transition and with any issues they've had with the mayor's court. I do think there are some things that are not appropriately funneled to mayor's court, and those are the things that I provided you, and I'll explain to you why. The highlighted sheet shows a list of crimes in the state of Ohio that qualify for a protection order. And for those of you that don't know, a protection order through criminal court is something that can be afforded to a victim while the charge is pending. And it gives them a protection from the defendant that's then entered into the leads. So if they're harassed, and there's a lot of different conditions in that protection order, the defendant can then be arrested for violating said protection order. Mayor's court has no authority or ability to grant a protection order. So from a victim standpoint, a victim of any of these crimes could not receive a protection order from mayor's court. Further, any crime of violence in the state of Ohio, and from a misdemeanor standpoint specifically, assault, domestic violence, aggravated menacing, aggravated trespassing, menacing by stalking, inducing panic, child endangering. If you receive a subsequent charge after a conviction for those, your subsequent charge is a felony. If those cases were to be heard in mayor's court, they could not be used for enhancement purposes for a second offense to a felony. And the reason they could not be used is because mayor's court is not what they call a court of record. In other words, you do not have a stenographer here that's taking down every word and every minute of what's done in those procedures. Further, the mayor, and she certainly is not required to do this and not expected to do this, does not follow Criminal Rule 12 and the colloquy that's required by the Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court before any defendant enters a plea on a criminal matter. In other words, they have to be advised that they have a right to a jury of their peers, they have a right to an attorney, and if they don't have an attorney at that hearing, they have to sign a written waiver that they're waiving their right to counsel. There's a whole colloquy that has to be gone through exactly to the letter, or that is not a valid plea, and that cannot be used for enhancement purposes. One of the things that currently is provided, and I think provided very well by the prosecutor's office through Xenia Municipal Court, which these cases would go through Xenia Municipal Court, are the issue of victims' rights. And the second handout I handed you on pages 2 and 3, it goes through all the rights that are provided to a victim for any of those crimes of violence as soon as they enter the door. A lot of these, if not most all of these, are now required by statute, so these are not optional. If any of these were to be funneled through mayor's court, you certainly would have to have somebody advocating on behalf of that victim to provide them with a written notice, explanation of their rights, would have to represent them at every stage of the proceeding, would have to be at a pretrial, would have to be at the trial, would have to be at sentencing, would have to notify them when there was any change in bond, when they were being released from jail. There's just a plethora of things now that are in place which make this a lot more complicated than it may first appear. The other crime that's not listed here that I particularly do not think should go through mayor's court is operating a motor vehicle while under the influence. Mayor's court by statute is permitted to hear those cases if it's a first offense and first offense only, but for the reasons I've already spoken about, the fact that it's not a court of record, that OVI conviction cannot be used to enhance the second charge. So if somebody's picked up on a second offense, OVI is one of those charges that every single time you get another one within a certain time period, in Ohio it's 10 years, or 20 years for a lifetime look back, it enhances what the penalty for those charges are. And if it's not a court of record, every subsequent offense cannot use that original conviction. Why is that significant? Because statistically, and I'm not going to give you the numbers because I don't have those committed to memory and I couldn't find them before I came tonight, but it's a very high number. Something like 90% of the people that get an OVI never get a second one. But of the people that get a second one, 85 to 90 of those get a third, fourth, fifth one. So in other words, most people, they learn their lesson, they get one, they never get another one. The majority of the people that go on and get another one, they get another one, and they get another one. So that's why it's important to be able to enhance those penalties so you can deal with them in a constructive manner and get them the help they need, hopefully, and also to protect the public at the same time. That's kind of the prosecution standpoint of mayor's court. I don't have any problem with every, let me get back with one other thing. You can make any law you want to in the village that's more restrictive than the Ohio Revised Code. You cannot make any law that's less restrictive than the Ohio Revised Code. So if you decided to start writing tickets under village ordinances, and those village ordinances are jailable offenses, okay? And say you decide you're gonna run those through mayor's court. And if they go to jail, or if they're required to go to jail, because some of these offenses have a required mandatory minimum days of jail, and if it's written under village ordinance, the village has to pay that bill for jailing that person. If it's written under state code, the county has to pay that bill. And I will tell you, since probably 1999, I've been a prosecutor since 97. I think I've represented the village since 2004. They've all been written under state code because nobody wants to defer that cost to the local folks to have to pay for those jail costs. So if you were to start writing those and using local ordinances that are jailable offenses, you need to be aware that we will be responsible for the jail cost. That being said, I think every non-jailable offense, every village-specific offense, every traffic offense, that you want to send through mayor's court, I think is highly appropriate and a good place for it to be. I think the mayor does a very good job. I've sat in on a few of her court appearances at her request, and I have no complaints about the mayor or how she handles her courtroom, so that's not where my concerns come from. My concerns come from the crimes specifically highlighted on this sheet of paper, the crime services that are currently provided by, I think we have a staff of 3 victim advocates, 1 on-call victim advocate, so there's always someone there 24 hours a day to do hospital visits or do whatever after hours. I would be very concerned if those services were no longer provided to those folks. I would be happy to answer any question you have about prosecution services, about the court and how we operate, or any other question you have related to the criminal justice system.
Couple questions, just so I'm clear about references you made. So our mayor's court could become a court of record?
I don't believe mayor's courts are permitted to be a court of record.
Okay, but we could have a prosecutor?
You could have your own prosecutor. You could do that. You could hire a prosecutor.
And we could, handle some of these, guarantee some of these rights through our mayor's court if we wanted to expand?
Well, you could expand and hire a victim advocate to provide these rights to those folks if that's what you choose to do. You are prohibited from hearing any case of domestic violence, either by threats or by actual violence. You cannot hear assault cases, aggravated trespassing cases, and I think there's one more. It's escaping me right now. By statute, those can't come to mayor's court. Well, juveniles, of course, and then there's another crime of violence that's escaping me that can't come to this court.
Okay.
So you would be a little limited by statute on what could come. They all can't come here.
Right.
And again, any of those highlighted would be entitled to protection order, and no matter what you do, you're not permitted to issue those.
And do you know of any mayor's courts that have a prosecutor in Ohio?
I have a limited experience with mayor's courts outside of Yellow Springs. I have been in Oakwood a few times, and I do believe they have a prosecutor, or at least they used to. Whether they still do or not, I do not know. The reason, and they don't funnel anything other than traffic through that court. But the reason they have a prosecutor is in order to amend the charge, only a prosecutor can amend the charge. You can't have an officer stand up and amend the charge in court. The mayor cannot amend a charge in court. So they have the prosecutor there to amend charges if said be, or to make an offer or a deal, or try to resolve cases with individuals coming through that court.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I think that what triggered you appearing here was the most recent incident where a local community member got called by the county, called ICE, and he's now...
One of them that they called ICE, my understanding, I don't have a full, complete understanding of the case, he had a detainer on him, was my understanding, an ICE felony detainer. Am I wrong about that? Am I right about that? So in an ICE felony detainer, which I don't know that anybody knows exactly or knew what exactly at that time what that detainer was for, only that was for a felony.
Can you explain what an ICE detainer is?
A detainer, whether it's ICE, whether it's whether it's any law enforcement agency, whether it's a court, basically is something that whenever I run your record or you come through the system, it's a notice that tells them you're wanted for this jurisdiction. Sometimes it will say what it's for. Sometimes, like this case, it will just say it's for a felony warrant. So if I have a warrant for your arrest today, there's going to be I don't care if it's for, let's say it's for whatever crime you've committed, and you weren't arrested at the time and a warrant was issued for your arrest. There's going to be a detainer placed upon you that you can't be released, and you have to be incarcerated until you answer for that warrant.
And I don't understand, though, was this through ICE, or where was that warrant from?
It's my understanding, like I said, I have not handled this case. I have very limited knowledge of it, that it was an ICE detainer.
Issued by ICE. Is that what that means?
Yes.
I mean,
but
I
they
think
would
we
have to
want to
go-
not
they-
have this happening.
They have to go, well, the best way to
So,
not have it happen again is not to have an ICE detainer put on.
Yes,
Of
yeah,
course, that's
yeah.
the best way.
We can't do anything about that.
Well, we
I
can't,
don't
but
think.
the detainer would have been issued by a court, I believe. So at some point, there's an immigration court or some court has had to approve that detainer. I don't think they have the ability just to issue it on their own. I might be wrong about that. I'm certainly not an expert on ICE. or their procedures, but I believe it has to go before a court to issue that detainer. I know any warrant I issue, I cannot issue it on my own. I can sign for that warrant, but then a judge has to approve it.
Other questions?
It's a checks and balance. I mean, I cannot just have somebody arrested. I can request they be arrested for a warrant. A judge has to approve that warrant, and then it gets issued. I think the issue that with that particular case, and let me say, I've kind of been involved with that case early on, not as a prosecutor, but an attorney who's a friend of mine who was trying to help him out contacted me, and I made a referral to them for an immigration lawyer, so that somebody that he could speak to try to help him through the process and assure that all of his rights were protected. But I'm not involved with that case. I don't have any involvement with that case.
So if there were someone here who was not a citizen and had stayed past their visa or whatever,
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to call them an illegal alien because I
Right.
think that's a pretty horrific term.
Right.
If a person like that had a sort of similar violation to what this happened, but there was no warrant, then would the Greene County not have called ICE?
I can tell you that we have a number of undocumented individuals that come through our court, and ICE is not contacted. ICE wouldn't come and pick them up if they were contacted. They're misdemeanors, but, they're not going to, they don't pick people up usually on misdemeanors, unless it's some type of repeat offender situation, repeat offender crimes of violence. They're not going to just randomly come and pick somebody up because they're undocumented. I know a lot of undocumented people that come through the court now.
But Greene County is not going to call them for that. Greene County is not going to call ICE just because an undocumented person
Well,
comes
you say
through.
Greene County, but it's not really Greene County. I mean, it comes through Xenia Municipal Court, so it's going to
Xenia
have.
Municipal
It's
Court.
going to have to be somebody in the court system or whatever law enforcement agency encountered them would contact them per se, and no, that does not happen, and not to my knowledge, does not happen on a regular basis at all without the detainer being placed there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a number of undocumented folks that come through the court, almost all traffic related because they don't have a driver's license. And they're of no interest, to my knowledge, to ICE. So,
Other questions?
I just want to say thank you. This is
Oh.
really helpful, and we're asking, Marianne, we're asking very pointed questions, so
oh,
thank you.
you're welcome. I'd be happy to come back anytime. Knock on wood, if the creek doesn't rise, I will be the judge in January 1 because no one's running against me. I have thoroughly enjoyed representing the village and the police department over the years. I will put a plug in for Chief Carlson. I think my experiences with him have been very positive. I think he tries to be a very proactive, pro-community law enforcement officer. And I'm not just saying that because he's right behind me. But thank you for.
Ron, I do have one other quick question.
Yeah.
Does Greene County have a formal relationship with Butler County?
What do you mean formal relationship?
I mean, there've been a lot of articles written about Butler County and their attitude around undocumented individuals, and I'm just wondering if we have some kind of relationship.
I don't think we have any relationship other than we would with Clark or any other county. I mean, are
Okay.
you suggesting, do we have a relationship with them where if we find somebody, we send them to Butler County?
Right.
No, not to my knowledge. Now, if Butler County had a warrant out of one of their local courts, and it was a warrant that had a pickup radius here, they would be informed to come and get them.
Okay.
If you have a felony out of Butler County and you get arrested in Yellow Springs, they're gonna come and get you for that. And there's different rules for the pickup radius on warrants. First-degree misdemeanor warrants are only contiguous counties. So if I have a first-degree misdemeanor warrant out of Greene County, Cuyahoga County, I can fight that extradition back to Greene County because that warrant's not really valid unless it's a contiguous county. Felonies are statewide. There are some instances where I can request a statewide warrant on a first-degree misdemeanor, but generally speaking, there's different rules for how those warrants are enforced. But there is not, to my knowledge, there is no special relationship with Butler County
Okay,
as
great.
far as how doing business.
Right,
Okay.
thanks. Megan has a question.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely.
Just to add on this issue. I think there's been some misunderstanding. According to Major Keller, Major Kurt Keller of the Greene County Jail, they did not call ICE. What happened was when he was fingerprinted, it went into a database that was accessible by ICE. That's my information.
Yeah, to my knowledge, at least I know through my court, that is not standard procedure for ICE to be contacted. It's just not.
This is helpful because, I'm sure you know, rumors
The
abound.
rumors are
and that-
abound, and it's a very unfortunate situation. I know Miguel. I like Miguel. He's a nice man. I will give you a perfect, very quick, short story. My son all my kids have gone through Yellow Spring schools. My youngest one's a junior right now. And probably for the last couple of years, they'll be running around town, and between the 4 or 5 of them running around town, they'll have, $4 between the 4 of them. And they go back to Miguel's taco stand, and they'll get a taco, and he'll be like, well, how come no one else is eating? Oh, we only have $4. So he's like, oh, here, hands everybody a taco. So he's a nice guy. He's a nice member of the community. I hope things work out for him, so.
All right.
Thanks
again,
again.
Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Yep. Were there any other questions or comments before we move? Okay,
Mayor,
thanks again.
I wonder if Mayor Pam wanted to.
Oh, yeah, Mayor Canine, did you want to say anything, or?
I will.
Okay. And while you are coming up here, I guess I wanted to mention something. I want, at our next meeting, to better understand the column second offense enhancement, and how it plays out in practice. So,
That those don't go to mayor's.
no, I understand, but, I mean, we just heard some things about, there is some discretion amongst some of these categories. And so that's the one that is not clear to me. So we don't need to talk about it today, but I want to understand like what the profile on these cases are. And it also relates to what I said at the last meeting is I want to I want to make sure, particularly the policy or practice or whatever that led to the situation with Miguel is vetted and adjusted. So anyway.
Clerk, would you make a note of that, please? All right, we'll get back to you.
Cool.
I also want to thank Megan and her work that she's done at the Yellow Springs News in the last 2 issues with helping the community, helping the community understand what was going on in this particular case. It was very helpful. So for that, we've got some appreciation. I also want to thank Ron for coming tonight and sharing his legal expertise with us. He didn't have to do this, but he did. And I've shared this information, this is just one statistic I want to share with the council. I've shared this with you before through the mayor's quarterly reports to the council, but it perhaps bears repeating here tonight, that over 90% of the cases that come before mayor's court are traffic related. At last count, it was something like 92.57, almost 93% are traffic related. Speeding, perhaps light out, which some license plate that you can't see, typical traffic-related stops. So, and most of these, of course, when you have the radar gun on you, it is what it is, just by the nature of the way traffic stops work. The type of criminal cases we do see are those such as trespassing. We've had about 3 trespasses, dogs at large, this sort of thing. Minor, I guess we might consider that they were minor, but in the eyes of the law, they fall under criminal statutory case. So I guess the thing I just want to bear repeating again is most of our cases are traffic related. And I also am very appreciative of Councilor Lewis's position on the reason we send OVIs to Xenia. I'm trained to hear OVIs. I can hear first-time OVIs. But one of the main reasons they go to Xenia is so the offender can get help, be it counseling, the weekend programs, and so forth. And currently, we don't duplicate that service that's offered so well in Xenia. So with that in mind, I think those are the main comments I wanted to make without getting repetitive. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Kanine. Okay. Matthew?
Yeah, this is kind of related to the case that I think has kind of sparked a lot of talk in the community, and just kind of falls into the national narrative a little bit too, as far as people being targeted by police and whatnot. And I think what we saw in this case was, I think the original charge in this incident was light out on the license plate. And often that's how these things get started. It's a light out on the license plate, it's a tail light out. They're typically, crimes of being poor, where you don't have, regular maintenance. You're not somebody who's taking your car to the dealership, or you don't have a newer car, you have an older vehicle. So just by virtue of being in that situation, you're more likely to get stopped by the cops, So something maybe we could work on in our interaction for those kind of really misdemeanor, low-level type of crimes, we'll call them, looking at a way to not start that person into the system, maybe just give them a warning, hey, wanted to let you know, noticed your license plate light was out, and leave it at that, not can I have your driver's license and all your papers, and because once you get into that, now we have this snowball potentially of whatever's going on when the original crime was not really a crime to begin with. So I don't know what kind of leeway we have procedurally for those kind of things, but maybe something to explore is just not to start going down that road to begin with.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. Any other comments? All right. We're going to move into citizen concerns, and this is the time on the agenda where you can speak for up to 3 minutes about anything that's not already on the agenda. Do we have any citizen concerns? Okay. Dan?
I'll take it.
All right.
Refrain from grabbing the mic, thank you. Oh, hi, I'm Dan Kerrigan. I wanted to talk about the South Walnut Short Street experiment. I call it an experiment because I'm opposed to it, and I ask you to not support it. I've read the Yellow Springs News article, the active transportation plan, and I have doubts. The project goal is to reduce congestion, and provide more safety. So, what is the baseline for those statements? Reduce congestion, improve safety. How did you measure that? I mean, what is the baseline? How do you measure what is congestion? How will you know the congestion has changed? How will we know if there's climate change? The police chief mentioned 2 incidents of students being struck, but neither was serious. So when I looked in the active transportation report, there's one non-incapacitating injury near South Walnut from 2014, 2018. Well, okay, whoa. When did the crash happen? Did it happen on a school morning, during the day, at night? Was it during the summer? That's not in the active transportation report. It's just a number. And I don't remember seeing anything in the Yellow Springs News Village Police Report column. So there is a lack of clear information in the article and the active transportation plan to make an informed decision. I participated in the 2011 Safe Routes to School grant application, which Ohio Department of Transportation awarded the village $325,000. Nearly all the funds went to sidewalks on Winter Street and Yellow Springs Fairfield Road. Writing the grant application is very similar to the active transportation plan. And I recall the Safe Routes to School committee heard some concerns about congestion. So I didn't just hear about it, I went and looked. So 8 years ago, I went looking and I sat and observed the drop-off and the pickup, the 3 entrances at Mills Lawn and at the high school / middle school. And the congestion and the risk concerns did not rise to any committee recommendations. You can get the report, well, actually, I think the village clerk should have it. Good luck on finding it at the website there. So 8 years later, I decided, you know what, I want to go back and see how is it. And it was like deja vu again, in the immortal words of Yogi Bear. The same morning ballet. A car stops at the crosswalk, the parent gets the kid out of the car, our police officers are there, Chief Carlson was there that day, the kids walk to the curb, next car the car drives on, then the next car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. To measure the individual vehicle display, is that my 3 minutes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do you want to hear the rest?
Can you wrap it up in 30 seconds?
So, basically, you have 15 minutes for this morning ballet to happen, and then poof, there's no more congestion. Everyone that I saw that morning was responsible, careful, compensating for children and other drivers, and I didn't feel that there was a problem. Disrupting the street traffic circulation for the whole village for a whole day, for the rest of the year, even if it's temporary, is based on no facts. I did not see that in anything, and it's all, to me, misguided, even if it's well meant. So that goes to the whole active transportation plan recommendations. I don't believe you've looked at the general value. Is this really going to solve anything? And you don't look at the side effects of how this, making these changes happens. That's my opinion. Here's my letter for the clerk. Any questions?
Dan, that last piece, you said on the general value of the whole active transportation plan or this particular initiative?
This particular project and the whole active transportation plan. I know I read in the things that it's been approved, therefore it's a done deal. I don't think you have enough money in this whole village budget to do much of any of those 20 recommendations. I know there's a whole thing about, well, we'll go get the money from someone else. That's still involving your staff time. It's still involving the village, and I still don't think that's wise.
I just wanted to get clarification on the last statement, whether you saw value, no value in this particular activity or the whole plan.
I should say no value, but I don't think you're solving a problem. And you can, there's my written statement.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Anything, any questions?
No questions, but I'll make a few comments. You can sit down. So I just want to review a few things because, you know, for most citizens, I think in any municipality, initiatives don't get attention until there's actually some action taken. We got a grant from Ohio Department of Transportation, Ohio Department of Health. They chose one of the top consultants, Tool Design Group, to do 6 of these across the state. So they followed a ODOT, ODH template, and we went through about a 6-month process where many citizens provided input. Patty was at the farmer's market with other people quite a few times. We were at Mills Lawn and so forth. So I would agree that, if you're looking for hard granular data, you might not find as much of that as you would like. But I think anecdotal information from our community, and a lot of people made the priority dealing with pickup drop-off at Mills Lawn. I think the most important thing, though, is, the idea is that none of this is valuable. We should never try anything. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is the kind of mentality that's gotten our village in trouble with when we went into the red, with the fact that, we've been behind on utilities, and you just name the list. So I know that it's hard sometimes to deal with change, but at the end of the day, the data that I just heard that we need to get information about is exactly why you do a temporary transportation project, to see if it really does fix anything, to see how it can be tweaked. And the active transportation plan is a work in progress. Everybody is willing to continue to comment on it. I will say we just got a Safe Routes to School grant to finish the sidewalk on Limestone. So the money is out there. If you don't have a plan, you don't get much opportunity to access those grants and other funds. So I feel very strongly that we've got a plan that we should at least see if some things could help. And again, we expect lots of feedback about what people didn't like. But, I hope, as with other things that we've seen, like the local solar initiative, that we can try to be as constructive as possible as we look at what these things might actually do to resolve problems. Talk to some of those Mills Lawn families, and the teachers and administrators, and you may get a different impression of why we're focusing on this. Okay, other citizen concerns, Matthew?
I thought this was later on the agenda, but I guess we're talking about it now.
No, it's not
so-
technically on the agenda. so,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I wasn't sure what that 5 minutes you had at the end of the old business was.
That's the committee.
Oh,
All right.
okay. All right, well, good, let's talk about this then. So as a parent of a Mills Lawn student who regularly bikes around the community, I bike to drop my kid off at the school, I feel like I see firsthand what's going on there. And I will say in the morning for the 15 minutes, there is congestion. This morning, matter of fact, I, at 8:05, counted how many cars were out there on Walnut Street. And heading south, or I'm sorry, heading north, there were 15 cars backed up all the way past Elm Street. And the other direction, there were 5. Now, the big bottleneck in the whole situation was there's no drop-off place. The crosswalk is the drop-off place. People pull up to the crosswalk, drop their kid off, 1 car at a time. Now, imagine if you went to the airport to catch your flight, and that's how you were doing drop-off. 1 car at a time, only at the crosswalk. Be a lot of people missing flights. You know, it makes sense, that whole area along the school, which I've drawn this fancy map here, right? You have a bunch of 12-hour parking there now. I think there's a half dozen spots between the 2 crosswalks, and then beyond the furthest south crosswalk, there's another half dozen or so spots. And then there's some handicap spots straddling the first crosswalk to the south towards Elm Street, or to the north towards Elm Street. You could easily move the handicap spots to that side of the crosswalk. All the other parking, make it school drop-off zone, no parking from 7 to 9 a.m., right? Nobody's parked there. Now you've got, you know, probably at least 8 spots for people. You can be dropping off 8 kids at a time. So now you don't have the congestion on Walnut Street. Because the issue with kids getting hit in the morning, you can see what's happening, right? If there's that many cars there at 8:05, that means at some point it's going to be 8:13, and you're going to be 4 cars deep in the line, and you're going to be like, Timmy, get out of the car, you're going to be late. And so Timmy jumps out and runs across the street, and somebody else's mom is heading to work, and boom, there you have a problem, right? But the problem is the bottleneck in not having anywhere to drop people off. The need to create a one-way street and all this other stuff is just, it's far beyond the scope of what the issue is, at least from how I'm observing it. You know, so I think if we made some of those zones where people are parked right now, dedicated drop-off spaces, and also move the cop from, instead of on the same side of the street as where the school is, but move them to the other side on the church side, so the kids that are getting off over there, cop can go, hey, come on over here to the crosswalk and cross the street. Makes a lot more sense than how we currently have things set up. So that's kind of my recommendation for going into this. I also think that by going to a one-way direction, you know, you're really creating a situation where you're inconveniencing basically everybody who lives on the south side of town. I can't tell you how many times I go to Tom's, park in the parking lot, come out, make a left on Walnut, make a quick left on Limestone, right on 68, and head back towards my house. It's probably like a daily trip almost, especially in the colder months. And so all those people now are going to have to make a right on Limestone, go up to Phillips, and then come back down West Davis, or come down one of the college streets. And that's just asking people to go, I've been making this left for decades. I'm just going to go ahead and make this left. You know, that's what I'm used to doing. I know that it's safe. There's nobody even here. Why am I going to go right and go all the way around? Or you're going to have people who want to go down Short Street, if you make that one way, who go, you know what, Short Street you can't go through anymore, but US Bank, they've got that nice drive-through lane right there. I can just hang a left down that and now come out on Xenia there. So, you know, people are like water. They will find a way. You know, and I think in this case, what we want is a safer drop-off place for schools. And I think we can achieve that just by establishing some drop-off places. You know, that's a great first incremental step in my mind. Like, let's try that, like, just to get it going. And
Thanks,
then see where it
Matthew.
goes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
As
Yes.
as much as possible. I think it is possible to stay to the 3 minutes, and I'd like for us to do that, for people to do that.
Okay.
So I appreciate reactions. That's a value of doing something, is you get people to start thinking about it. And this plan is not cut in stone, it's some ideas, and I look forward to experimenting and seeing what's going to work, because the more we can make this a place where people feel safe walking and biking, and where it's safe to well, ideally, where it's safe for kids to walk and bike to school, preferably, the better our community will be.
I guess that's my question, who's saying it's not safe? I mean, I guess I don't feel like it's not safe right now, I feel like it could be improved.
Okay, got it.
Okay, any other citizen concerns? All right, if not, we're gonna move into old business, and first up is hearing some feedback about the draft policing assessment and how we're gonna move forward. So, Lisa, are you starting that, or?
Well, I could, we have a final work product now from Hillard Heinz. It's signed by the founder and president of the company. It begins with an executive summary that includes some actions, and then it goes into quite a bit of depth around an overview of the police department, some of the key elements supporting the organization, things like policies and procedures and rules and training and budget and performance evaluation, then goes on to address accountability and community engagement, and then it has a section on community and neighborhood policing models. We first discussed this as a work product in progress last meeting because it's a really long document, and there was really not, I think, sufficient time even in the release of the packet for everyone, for any of us, the council or the community members, to completely digest the entire document. And so it's on the agenda again tonight to see if anyone has any additional comments or feedback about this document. What we discussed at the last meeting that I really appreciate is that just as the active transportation report can be a work in progress, we believe that it would be advantageous as we gather input from the council and from community members to capture those and have them just become a part of our overall police assessment, so that the Hillard Heinz is a foundational document to which we add. I also appreciated in our last conversation that we pointed out that quite a bit had changed from when this assessment was requested and when it was finally delivered. And so I did appreciate that Josue was able to point out some things that are already in play. And I thought it was good that there was then an alignment between work that was already going on, particularly around policies, and the recommendations of the report. So in other words, time didn't stop. Everyone didn't just freeze while we were waiting for an external perspective. We already were moving forward on things that we knew needed to be done. That's the summary I have. I do have a few comments, but I'll stop now and just see if anyone else has anything they want to add just to context and history.
Well, I'll say a few things. I was disappointed that it took so long to get the report, because we were told it was going to happen in, I guess, the whole process was going to take 6 weeks, and it took a few months. And then, because it did take so long, we put out that draft, which was really rough, which was also disappointing. So now we have the final product, and we wanted to have time for council, we wanted to have time for the chief and his staff and Josue to be looking at this and to be thinking about it. I had one conversation with one of the people that was on the Justice System Task Force who had some important points to make, I think, concerns about the report. And I guess I will take the time to write down more comments. But the one thing that I'm concerned about right now is, with all of the recommendations, which most of them make sense to me as a layperson, do they make sense for a police department that's our size? And if so, then are there examples of other communities approximately our size who who, are these best practices that have already been initiated in other places? And I hope to see if we can find any information from the consultant about that, because otherwise, I think we just need to know, are these things that, yes, they'll work in a town of 50 or 100,000, but do they work in, are they reasonable for a community the size of Yellow Springs? So that, I think, is one of the biggest questions that I have right now.
Yeah. For example, the geographic
Yeah.
based, when I think there's some communities where one geographic slice would be the size of Yellow Springs. Right, so I mean, I just, yeah, I don't know either.
I mean, and I do think it gives us something to look at, to sort of a positive thing to look at, to say, compare, okay, well, yeah, that would be a good idea, or, no, probably not, but.
Well, since we mentioned the geographic thing, I sort of thought that was a good idea, you know, the whole sort of beat cop approach to things. I guess I sort of struggled to sort of see where the lines of demarcation were and what, you know, if those were, or the degree to which those were appropriate in terms of equal size, et cetera. And I know last time we did talk about, you know, the budget ramifications. Are we talking about, you know, the specialties and whatnot? Are we getting more people or just giving more people more responsibilities? You know, again, the budgeting ramifications of some of those decisions. You know, I know we like using the term best practice, but I wouldn't personally set that out as a milestone. What's more appropriate is good practice. You know, is it a good practice for us? I think that should be the rule. I mean, we can decide ourselves whether it's a good practice for us. Best practice, no, is it emblazoned on some pedestal somewhere else in the policing universe? I don't know. It doesn't have to be. But will it work for us? So I think we can, it might be an overstatement to say we can cherry pick, you know, the ideas. But then at the end of the day, that's really where we ought to be. Because these are not commandments, you know, that they're telling us what to do. These are the kind of things that, you know, might make life a little different. Is it better? Would it be better? Don't know. But we can decide, you know, how much better or different we want to be. So, again, I think there was a lot of positive in there. I think how it works for us and can we afford to do those things, or how would we do these things so that we can afford them, are questions that ought to be answered. And I think there's folks, you know, that work in this building that can answer that question better than I can.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up to, do we have any citizen comments or questions about the policing assessment at this point? Okay, so what are next steps?
I think that it makes sense. Well, first, Judy, have you gotten any?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it makes sense for council members to write up their thoughts, give them to Josue.
Yes,
And
and
for-
we're meeting with our team to review the recommendations and what's appropriate. I think Kevin touched a bit on this. What's a best practice versus what's going to work for us? What's already working for us? As I noted at the last council meeting, there are some things on there that are not relevant to us. They're either already underway, or they've been looked at and we're working on them or address them in another way. Just a highlight of where the difference are in terms of the recommendation and in current practice. You know, one of the recommendations is to create a new vision statement. And we know we already have one, and it's, you know, do we need to revisit that and look for alignment and look for other things that already fit into that recommendation. I too have had several interactions with folks who have strong opinions about the police assessment, and they make sure to share them with me. And one of them is that, you know, a lot of folks around the town that have put a lot of effort into this, primarily the Justice System Task Force, and some of these recommendations are things that they've talked through and they looked at, like what's the right size of the police department? I know in an initial interaction I had with a police officer, a high-ranking member, it's like, hey, look, this says I get more staff. And it's not, it's not just about getting more staff, it's about, what does our community need, and do we have the right resources and our resources aligned to serve those needs? So there's a lot that we need to discuss and look into, and I know it's on my radar to come before council in that first October meeting, October 7th, to provide an outline of where we are in terms of our internal review. We looked at the recommendations. We'll provide a status update on all those particular recommendations. What are we working on? How are we addressing it? And if it's relevant to us in our time now. So that's what I'll be bringing on October 7th for the council meeting. It's collecting that input from our community, with our staff. And those were the three questions. What that input is are the three questions that Lisa and Marianne presented 2 weeks ago, which are, what do we appreciate about the report? What is missing? And what's incorrect? And one of those examples is, yes, we need to work on some strategy work, but do we need a new vision statement? We don't. We have one that there are a lot of individuals spent a lot of time and effort working on. So in terms of next step, we'll have those internal meetings for our own comment period internally, reviewing some of those practices, whether they're best practices or they work for us, and we're also in our budget process, and we'll have 2 work sessions, September 27th and 28th, where we'll discuss some of those budget alignments and the conversation around budget. The other thing that I need to follow up with select members of council is on what are the next steps from a community perspective. So I know we've announced that comments can come to Judy, and we'll find an internal way to compile all those comments and group them by topic or theme, whatever they may be. But there may be a desire to have a follow-up community forum, like we did back in the summer. I know the council asked for me to participate on that, so I flew in from DC to participate on that, and that's how important that forum was. And we may find an interest in the same passion for another community forum. And so that will be on the schedule or proposal for the October 7th. Should we have that, and if so, what are the proposals to have that meeting? I know we have a lot on the agenda. About a month ago, I was tasked with keeping sort of an eye on where events are. We've got the comprehensive land use plan, we've got the EPA meetings coming up, and this other community forum. So being also mindful of what the calendar looks like for the remainder of the year.
I'm wondering if it would make sense to, after both Way and the department has digested this and reacted to it, to develop a sort of a draft strategic plan that would include what it would include and what it might not include. And then at whatever time would be appropriate, put that out for the community. Like, if there are going to be some new initiatives. I mean, one of the things that the report kept talking about was transparency, not a word that I particularly like, but at any rate, the idea of having more of a presence in the community so people understand what's happening as much as people can that's not protected information, so that there's more of a communication back and forth. So that I would think there would probably be some plans to do some more of that. And so if we got to a place where these are the things we're planning on doing or thinking, and then maybe having an opportunity for.
Yes, and they are on several different fronts. We'll have a social media discussion, I believe next week. We're trying to schedule one in terms of guidance for our internal operations, regarding our social media engagement. I don't know if you noticed, but I've gone deep into open discussion. I read, I respond, and I'm engaged there on selected things. But yeah, I'm there, and that's an effort for me to stay connected with the residents in Yellow Springs. There are a lot of things that aren't coming to us. There's some things that's not necessarily the best vehicle to get information to us, but I'm on it, and I'm following up on some of those items, and that's also going to feed into the social media conversation we'll have internally about how to continue that engagement, or what kind of level of engagement to have in the different digital assets or places, right? Because there's open discussion, there's bulletin board, and there's so many, and there are different stakeholders in those different areas.
So what I would like to see is some prioritization come out of our feedback. And so hopefully all council members are thinking about that. And I think of prioritization in two ways. One is what's some low-hanging fruit. So if we agree, for example, that a geographic policing structure makes sense for the village, that seems like something that we could institute. Some of these things, you know, dealing with tensions, I mean, that's a lot of work and it's important. But, you know, if we want to like sort of capture some things that we could do relatively short term.
Yes.
That being said, I think the other part of prioritization is what's going to have the most impact. And I like Mary Ann's idea of like maybe doing a mini strategic plan, and it has captured some of those things, and getting some feedback to make sure that we are thinking about the things that we think are going to be impactful, and getting input from the community would be helpful.
Yes, and I can write, so we can write some of that up. I think that you've seen some progress on some of these recommendations without aligning those activities with those recommendations. For example, I think my first council meeting is, where are we with emergency management? And we've jumped on that. We've shared our work with that. We've held several meetings around that. The second one is policies. Where are we on our policy reviews? Provided continuous updates on where we are with those policies, what's yet to review. And that's a recommendation that's in this police assessment. And, you know, that's low-hanging fruit, that's priority items, so. Evaluations, and that's something we're also looking into, so. Yeah, so I'll, on my October 7th, I'll provide an update on those recommendations and perhaps share the draft list of priorities, because I think there are items that are priorities for us now, what's urgent, what's in front of it. A lot of it's, you know, we're going about our day-to-day operations, and we're encountering challenges, and we're addressing them as they come up. And that may be necessarily not what's in your periphery, because, you know, we're here in the weeds, you're up here at the vision, at the 30,000 foot range. So we'll share some of that a priority list on October 7th.
Great. Kaneda, anything else?
I was just going to ask, for our feedback, what's a date that you'd like to get that back from council?
I think, well, October 7th, we're providing our feedback. I know at the last council meeting, we were talking about just, the folks didn't have enough time to digest and gather their thoughts. I think Lisa, maybe another 2-week period would be a good time frame to.
Yeah, like by the 27th?
So by the 27th, folks can have their
That too
comments back to Judy and myself. And it'll be great if they're aligned with those 3 questions that we've proposed. What's good, what's missing, what needs to correct. You said it differently. What do you appreciate about the assessment?
Okay, great.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Sure, Matthew, come on up.
Yeah, so Matthew Kirk, Southview Drive. So I've kind of been following the policing situation in town over the last few years, and I feel like when we seem to be at our best is when our officers are, you know, demonstrating service and highly visible. I think, in fact, that's largely how our chief ended up getting his job. You know, is that people saw him out there in community, actively engaging with people, and felt that he had a good understanding for the people of the community. I also think it's why, like Officer Dave Maister is so popular is because he's made similar kinds of connections with a lot of villagers just through his service. In a community this size, one thing that always strikes me is that I don't typically see our police officers out on like bicycles or, you know, doing a lot of walkthroughs. I mostly see officers in cars. And I think in a lot of ways that vehicle poses like a barrier for a lot of people, and just you don't have that same opportunity to interact with people. And possibly even this becomes a way to recruit potential officers is, to create a bike officer position, for somebody who is more outdoor inclined, and try to recruit people along that kind of vein. But in general, just to focus on, even in evaluations, focus on how people are serving the community versus metrics that are maybe more aligned with law enforcement priorities. So, without going into the report, which I've not read all of other than some of the executive summary and highlight things, my experience has just been, even when people recount stories of the past, whether it's Chief Grody or Chief McKee, they always are telling stories about how entwined they were with the community, about how Officer Grody brought donuts for the crossing guards in the morning, or Chief Grody brought donuts for the crossing guards in the morning, or whatever it was. So the more that we can get back to more connection, I think, the better the relationship will be. Thanks.
Matthew, were you at the forum back in May, June? Okay.
The reason I asked is because the forum was set up in a way to pull out what were their experiences with police? What did they appreciate, or just their interaction? What really molded their views about police engagement? A lot of that was related to what you're saying. It's that human touch and that mold that shaped their views on policing.
I caught a raccoon with one of our local officers. I mean, how much more touch can you get?
John, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, and by the way, we are getting those bike officers, so that is in the works.
I think that, as a lot of people have said, a lot of things in this report probably can just be implemented. They seem like low-hanging fruit, that pretty relatively straightforward. And I think, as I've heard some of you hints to, the report doesn't sort of do a deep dive into everything that the department is doing. As we all know, that there has been a lot of concerns about the Yellow Springs Police Department and how they do their work after New Year's Eve. A lot of people, probably like the first 4 people that spoke up, at the council meeting directly after, try to make clear that that this had been like an ongoing issue that needed to be addressed. And so I just wanted to reemphasize, not that it's super relevant to the report, that I think that in order to credibly address people's concerns, that it's also important to work with a Justice System Commission to have ongoing work in that area, and sort of be able to develop a deeper level of institutional knowledge about the problem to sort of do a continuous improvement. But yeah, I think that this is great, and obviously there's a number of things that could just change how you do this and that, then it would be more professionalized, and that's definitely will help things work more smoothly. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Megan?
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I just want to also add one more thing along the lines of things that have already been implemented, and that is that Chief and I have been meeting more regularly. We've kind of figured out the police report and what was missing and how to make sure that we get all of that. And I think you'll see that reflected in the police reports over the last maybe month or so, and hopefully continuing, which I think is a really important communication to the community of what the police are doing on a daily basis.
Great.
So I just wanted to report that. But encouraging more transparency is something, that is a word I do like. I think is really important, I think will really help. And the other thing I just want to add is, I was at the meeting, and, there's some things with the report I wish that it did go into more specifics, mentioning some of the things like New Year's Eve, and it doesn't have like the historical context, unfortunately. But the value, I thought, was in that meeting that we had. And to me, what came out was people were saying, we want to see our officers, we want to have that informal engagement. And the officers were there that night, in plain clothes, a few of them, sitting with citizens. And I thought that was a great step in that direction. So I would love to see more of that. Officers in plain clothes speaking with citizens in whatever, maybe it doesn't have to be more of a, that formal way, but opportunities for that, I think, moving ahead would be something I'd be interested in. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, anything else on the assessment for now? All right, thanks everyone. And we're going to move into a discussion about commission effectiveness. Who's starting this one?
I will.
Lisa.
So at our last meeting, Mary Ann and I brought up the agenda item that we thought there was an opportunity to do an evaluation of commission feedback, of commission effectiveness. And it came more from just the addition of a couple more commissions that, are coming up, and they're just like blossoming, and the Justice System Commission isn't formed yet. And, just really to take stock with something that we hadn't done for a while as we go into budgeting. So we left that meeting with an action to put together a feedback form. So there's a draft of that in the packet, a proposed commission feedback form. What we would like your input on, though, is a process to gather this input, because I realized that as I was developing this, I thought, okay, we could do this a couple of ways. The council person on the commission could just make that a primary element on the agenda for the commission and facilitate a discussion. But, some people are more comfortable, particularly things like if they're going to say the baby's ugly, they may not want to speak out, right? So you want to give people, maybe an opportunity to share something more anonymous and private. So then I thought, okay, we can just email the form to all the commission members and cajole them to complete it and return it to Judy, and then we'll have anonymous feedback and people can say whatever they want. But, that has some disadvantages too, because you lack the group process and you lack the experience that a group of people who have been working towards some particular goals have. There's value in that discussion. So I thought, well, maybe we need to do both. Maybe we need to have the council members facilitate a discussion, keep notes, collate that, and then also invite additional anonymous feedback via email for anyone who either left something on the dance floor and they didn't quite say it when they wanted to, or didn't come out right, or that, they go home and they're thinking about it after the meeting and they're like, I just didn't think about this, I should say it. So we just wondered how you thought about that. I think the combo of both facilitated discussion and also anonymous feedback is probably my preference. So just comments about the process, any comments that you have about the questions that Mary Ann and I collaborated on, and then next steps.
I'd like to piggyback on that. I'm seeing this as something sort of like staff gets evaluated. I don't know, and staff does self-evaluation.
Yes.
And I don't know whether teams do a team evaluation. At any rate, I'm seeing it in that light, a way for commissioners to do self-evaluate. How am I doing on this commission? And how is the commission doing? And I would recommend that this be an open process that's done during the commission meetings. I would hope that people on the commission can be honest enough to talk about. However, I think we can also give people the opportunity to do it anonymously. I think we could figure out some way if that would happen. Also, that it not just be a one-time deal, that it be something that, so in the fall, part of what we're going to do as we're sort of wrapping up for the year is to look at how have I done, how could I have done better? What would have helped me to do better? And to do that with the commission itself. So that's what I'm thinking, that we take October, November, and December in some ways for the commissions to take some time with this.
Annually.
Pardon?
Annually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it'd be nice if that rolled into the goal setting,
Yes,
which I think
exactly.
is a nice thing to make sure that all our commissions are doing,
Yes.
so. So I love both, and we've got our SurveyMonkey platform that can anonymize everything, so that would be a way to put this simply into that format. And then, in terms of documents, I like that the values are there. I want to make sure that they get both the full goals kind of chart, but also our priorities, right? Because that's, our 2019 priorities is where we've decided to put our focus, so that would be a good document. But I think the chart is nice because it gives some context. And otherwise, I love the questions. I think you guys did a really nice job thinking through this. Other comments?
Well, I'm just wondering if this is something that, we would make it a priority and talk about this with our commissions in October. I just don't know, all of the commissions, obviously planning and zoning, totally different animal, but the other commissions, I just don't know if, there's something that's a burning agenda item that they can't put it off to make this an October activity to facilitate this question. I can in my commissions
Yeah.
have this be an October conversation.
Yeah, well, I just, in the packet, just separated the 3 pages, the form, the draft form, and the values. Planning to send that to the HRC. I think it's certainly timely for that commission in particular, and any members of the HRC that are listening, you know what I'm talking about. But I think it's just a good time, maybe to go through those things every now and then. We are in flux on that commission right now, and so it's a good time for this type of discussion for a couple of different reasons. So, yeah, I'm in favor with. I certainly would have no problem taking it, to our next commission meeting and discussing it.
So I remain very concerned about capacity with 3 more commissions coming online. It's concerning. So I just think we do need to take a really hard look at the work that needs to be done and our priorities.
Yep. So since Planning Commission was brought up, and the purpose statement's not here, and I know it's ORC, but was there a plan to also do this work with Planning Commission?
I think we should do it with Planning Commission.
Okay,
too.
I want to emphasize, to me, I think it's incredibly important, because, I guess for as long as I've been on council, there's been this, I don't know, I think there's room for the whole process between council and Planning Commission to be more effective. So I'll just leave it at that. So.
I also, to your point, Lisa, I think that we should be stating that in here, that part of the reason why we're doing this is that we're concerned about capacity. And if there are ways that people think we can, whether it's merge 2 commissions or drop off certain tasks because they're not that relevant or whatever, to have people be looking at that.
Okay. All
Agree.
right. Yep.
Do you want me, I can make a couple little edits and send it to Judy.
Great.
I just changed the yellow, see where it says that, we ask the commission members, add when we decide on process, so that it would just say, we ask the commission members be prepared to discuss these questions at an upcoming commission meeting, and you will also be given the opportunity to respond in a survey if you prefer that, or something like that.
So how will people be able to access SurveyMonkey? How would that happen?
So, Judy, have you ever messed with SurveyMonkey?
Long ago. It's not super difficult.
Yeah,
And that link
it's
could
pretty
be sent out
basic.
to all the board and commission members.
Yeah. So one thing is, I know Kevin and I have the password information.
Judy does also.
Oh, Judy, you have it?
I'll make sure I send it again.
Make sure. And then, yeah, so maybe Judy, and then, you know, if you need Josue's support, yeah.
I'm familiar with SurveyMonkey. One of the.
And so we did purchase like, you know, we've got like a few more of the frills,
Okay.
so.
Just one of the, just in looking at the questions, are qualitative responses.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and as you look to do some analysis of it, it's not an easy thing to do. You're limited to keyword searches, and maybe you want to aggregate certain keywords or certain phrases, but, so what you'll get more out of it is more of a dialogue, a summary of dialogue. So just something to be mindful of if we're going to have every member in each commission submit a survey on qualitative responses. How do you?
I did not see this as a survey, like SurveyMonkey.
Okay.
I just thought that we would send a flat file of these questions out and say, you discussed this? Like, let's say I've had a conversation with economic sustainability, that they could just be sent the flat file that said, we know you talked about this in commission. If there's anything more you want to add on these questions, let me know. Respond to Judy, and Judy sees it and takes the names off. I did not, because it is qualitative, and the value is in the qualitative feedback.
Right.
So I didn't think of it as making it like quite as formalized as building a SurveyMonkey.
So, and I raise that just because if we're gonna put in a SurveyMonkey, one of the values of doing so is that then you can compare data.
Yeah,
And do
but-
some analysis. Here, we'll have some limitations, so.
Well, the flip side is, you can generate a report really easily with all the comments. So that takes away some of the work in processing all that. And I do like that it's just anonymous.
All right, well, we have to keep it matched too with commissions. That's the only setup thing.
Mhm.
So we know which commission.
Yeah, so the commission name will be
Question
a
one,
drop-down.
yeah,
Will be a
exactly.
drop-down, that they can't type it in, they'll have to select
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
You link all the responses to that drop-down selection.
Well, it might be almost two different things. So you do the process with the group. You also say you're welcome to submit more feedback to the clerk. And then SurveyMonkey could be used if you want to sort of open up the questioning more to board and commission members in a general sense. Where do you see the greatest value in terms of service to the village? Where do you see making the greatest impact? How would you, those kinds of more philosophical questions that don't necessarily fit in a discussion of how is HRC functioning well today, but are more, how can we change boards and commissions in a bigger way that might actually make them more effective, to kind of broaden that question. Then that wouldn't have to be specific to a particular board or commission, but could just be general information for council as you look at what do we want to do? What broad changes might we want to make?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good idea, and I also think it would be best done by a actual conversation with people in a commission. It sparks, like then in the Environmental Commission, there were some people that said, hey, why don't we get involved with the housing? So, I mean, any commission might, if they have a conversation, can talk about how they interact with other commissions. I think the only reason, I mean, I guess we could do a survey, have everyone do a SurveyMonkey and then come back. The value is in discussion, though, I think, with each other. And the only thing that we'd want anonymity is if someone feels they want to say something negative about someone or the commission, and they don't want it to be assigned to them, I guess.
And how does that conversation get summarized and pushed back up? Is it, are you gonna have that conversation with the commissions that you're the liaison? And then you
Yes.
come back to the council and say, this is what I learned from my discussions. This is what we need to do.
Yes. Yeah. And have it be, not just happen at one time, like maybe October, the commissioners get the question before their meeting. And then, I don't know, I need more time to think this through, but I don't think it should just be a one-meeting thing.
Well, I agree, conversation, discussion is a priority. And then I think we just have to give people room to provide feedback in other ways. So, okay.
So on the
I think we
survey,
got
what
it.
do we agree? Yes to the SurveyMonkey, put in the questions?
Well, maybe that's a question for your boards and commissions.
I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like there's some difference of opinion, and maybe it would be valuable, maybe it wouldn't. And one thing that I think we struggle with sometimes is the difference in approaches to problem-solving generationally. And if that's thrown back at boards and commissions to say, what do you think? How can we best gather
That's right,
information
yeah.
from you? And then see where we want to, do we want to do that?
Are we allowed comments? John, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, sure, John.
Having served in the justice system.
This is actually just for me, looking at the definition of public record, and I do believe that the feedback that commission members gave you guys would be considered a public record for those purposes. So I don't really see any way that you could make them anonymous. Also, I guess.
Well,
perhaps
just because it's anonymous, it can still be a public record.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
but there's like a stripping out, but the original record is still public. Whatever original form it comes in would still be public. I mean, I guess if it was handwritten and they didn't know their hand, like, I guess I do also just want to state that perhaps my imagination for how you guys are all familiar with like anonymous message boards, I assume, and yes, so the imagination runs wild, and the ways that the potential for a public official to criticize other public officials in an anonymous record. I also don't think that you could actually do it legally, but I'm putting out both that I think it's a bad idea and I think it's sketchy on the legal side. But I do think it's great to ask people to send you guys written feedback. I just think it should be signed. But yeah, because you don't just want like groupthink from the discussion, a discussion about it, and I totally agree with your view that you should do both. My only disagreement is with the feedback being unsigned. Thank you.
okay, thanks.
These are technical issues. I mean, the anonymous part, I mean.
No, to anonymize something, though, that's not problematic. If everything is sent to me and I anonymize it and send it out to you, could you make a public records request of me and say, I want every email you received on this topic? Well, you could, but you'd be defeating your own purpose. So it's unlikely, I feel, that would happen. Someone else could do the same thing. Would they receive those? Yes, they would. Most folks have some level of respect for that process and don't tend to jump in the middle of it. Could it be obtained? It could. Does it exist as a record? It does. Could I anonymize it and hand it back to you? Yes, I can do that. And yes, you will not know who sent it.
And what I'm referring to with the technical issue is, SurveyMonkey can be set up so that, the identity of the person filling out the survey never is known. I mean, it's not there in the first place to pull out. So now, do you get a court order and go to SurveyMonkey and see if we can figure it out and trace IP addresses? Well, is it that big a deal?
Yep. Okay, so we have enough to move forward on this? Yep. So it sounds like the plan is folks are going to talk to their commission members, and then on the 7th, I guess we'll resolve SurveyMonkeys or writing or whatever.
I'd like to stay in communication with you.
Yeah, I'm going to change like 2 sentences, and I'll send it for you to look at, and then we'll get it to everybody.
Okay?
So that raises a point about library commission, which doesn't meet that regularly. We're just trying to remember where our next meeting is. It's not going to be before then, I don't think. I think it might be November. So,
Okay.
I mean, I don't think we want to call it, whenever it is, I don't think we want to call a special meeting to talk about this.
Yeah, so I think the next meeting, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're going to segue into a related topic around effectiveness. And I had mentioned at the last meeting that I wanted to kind of figure out where we were going with the Justice System Commission or consider an alternative. Because this is a commission that, we approved to get started last year. We, kind of waited on the assessment. Justice System Task Force was finishing up. We didn't get a lot of feedback when we reached out to citizens about the commission. And now we're talking about this police assessment, and kind of like what John said is something that I've been thinking about as well, is how do we engage citizens to provide capacity and help us vet those recommendations and priorities, and how do we move that forward. So I guess I'll wrap up my initial comments by saying I am not seeing a member of council currently who is going to be able to take this on. And with Kaneda wrapping things up at the end of the year, I don't know about, who that new council member or members might be, but I want to put out there that since we're starting to do this work, I think a hybrid could be a manager's advisory board. Doesn't mean that the Justice System Commission would never get started up, but I don't think it makes sense to wait until next year and not do anything between now and then. So that's my opening comment.
So I guess my A question I would have is would one of the early tasks that the Manager's Advisory Group be to coordinate or, monitor implementation of some of the aspects of the report and other things? Or like, even if it's not a commission, but it's an advisory group, what are you actually doing?
Yeah, well, Josue, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there's obviously an issue that we need to address now, and it's the police assessment, and a lot of those recommendations fall within this task force. I also want to bring in some of that work from the task force has done and invest a lot of energy into this process, because I think a lot of it talks about we need these groups of people to have input in the process. How do police department go about executing its operations and the level of community input? So I see the two can work hand in hand in the implementation of the recommendations. So on the initial activities, I see just our approach of how we're going to implement some of these recommendations will fall under this advisory group.
So the police assessment had a couple of recommendations that I think are adjacent to this topic. One was to have an advisory group.
Yes.
So, I think that's one of the recommendations that I thought was good, and it was also something that we had talked about separate from the assessment. So that was a confirming recommendation. The other group, and this was something that was proposed late last year too, has to do with a process and a way to listen to citizen complaints. Mm-hmm. And quite a bit of work was done on that in collaboration with Village Mediation about how that might play out. The chief was involved in that as well. That's a different purpose and a different group of people, but also, an initiative that I care about a lot. So for me, I kind of want to sort out if we're not going to keep moving forward with standing up the commission right now. And I guess that makes sense. I don't know. I feel like progress could be made, but we did not have I think we had 3 people express interest. So that was an issue too. I think we need to sort out these different bodies and what they would do and how they would interact with, how the order in which they would be implemented, what would be the cost implications, that sort of thing.
And I guess I feel that that's part of the advisory board's,
Okay, so
manager advisory board's work.
Yeah.
Because, and just to clarify one thing about when you said that progress could be made on the JSC, but, you're not planning to be that council liaison, right?
I wouldn't want to be primary, but I would want to be very involved in the complaint piece.
Right.
But
Okay.
I see them as separate.
Right. And I will say, after some discussion with Judith Hempling in particular, I am willing to be a council rep on a manager's advisory board, but I will admit, I don't have the capacity to, start up
Head up the
another
commission,
commission
yeah.
and be a council liaison. So, so that's sort of the medium that I
Yeah.
want to strike. And I do think this group would ultimately accomplish the same things. But again, it doesn't mean that JSC is out of the picture. There may be somebody that gets elected this year that's one of the things they want to do. And, then I think we have to be open to that.
Right, to your question, would I want to do it? Potentially, yes, but not without offloading something else.
Right.
That's why there's 5 of us, so I just can't, I don't have the capacity to take that on either.
Yeah.
So, but if I'm reelected and we go forward, then, we'll look at assignments again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it help if I guaranteed that you'd be elected? No. I'm joking.
No words.
There's a hand.
Oh, yes, Megan.
I guess I'm curious why a manager's advisory board rather than a commission, like what the difference is in actual time commitment. What I see is that it kind of contradicts a big part of the report, which is about transparency, which is that the meetings are open to the public, they're noticed, it's part of, it's answerable to council directly, not the administrative side, which is the people's representation. So I guess I'm curious why this shift to that.
So I would advocate for transparency. I'm good with, having minutes, publicly announced meetings, that sort of thing. I don't have any opposition to that. I don't know how you feel, Josue. Yeah, Megan, I think honestly, it really just comes down to, we all are doing so much right now, and I don't want a commission that, is not got the proper leadership. And when you start up a new commission, the council liaison has to take a primary role. Those commission members are responsible for minutes. There's just a variety of things where I think a manager's advisory board, like with housing, has, the manager's able to provide that capacity out of his office, and I think we're getting to the same place. But the main reason why I guess I brought this up is I don't want to lose the opportunity for citizen involvement right now. And if we start a commission, I don't think it's going to happen until next year at best. So.
The goal would be maybe to become a commission?
Sure. I think, and I think there are great reasons to have the Justice System Commission. But yeah, so I see this as potentially an avenue there, and also the potential to do some good work.
I also think it's important to explore why there wasn't more interest from community members in being on that commission. I'm secondary assigned to Justice System Commission with Canada as primary. And what we did complete was conversations with people who'd been on the commission, because I thought it was important for Canada to come up to speed with all of the work that had happened with Justice System Task Force and the dynamics of that commission as well. And I thought we would be, given conversations that I've had and what's on social media, I thought we would be swamped with candidates who wanted to serve on that commission. And we were not. And I speak for myself. I would really like to hear you talk about this because it's your commission.
Yeah.
But what that kind of set me back in terms of momentum, because it was like, it's not enough to even have a quorum. So, I really want to hear from you, Kaneda.
Yeah, that was a major issue, is that when we got 3 applications after, especially thinking about the momentum going in last year and then continuing on, and especially with I know that the police assessment was kind of something that wasn't directly tied initially, but then knowing that we would have this body of work and saying, okay, we can use this, and the anticipation of that coming out, I felt like we would have more people come out, but I do want to know more about why perhaps people are, I don't think it's that people are not interested, you know, I would like to know more about what it is that's prohibiting people from signing up. So I don't know what the best channel to get that information would be, but maybe I'll think about how to collect that, because it seems like there has to be some barrier that's keeping people from.
Right.
And that would be a good agenda item to talk about in the advisory group.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, sure.
You know, because I mean, then this does tie to our prior conversation about commission effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, you know, we want to have commissions that are aligned to the goals and values, and we also need people who have expertise to bring to the commission. So both passion, but also domain knowledge.
And that, you know, if we look back at the documents that were created about the Justice System Commission, that was a big point.
Yeah.
The way we often talk about it in my workplace is, you know, the difference between retail outreach versus wholesale outreach. And I do think an important strategy for forming the advisory board, just like with housing, is that we do some of that retail outreach and bring in some of that expertise. It's the same thing we're going to talk about when we get to the active transportation committee. And so I think in that regard, we are on a similar track to the Justice System Commission, because we need to have people that can help us process, find some of those models and that sort of thing. But we want to have a good diversity of citizens involved.
I think another thing to consider is the capacity piece, because as we're talking up here about our capacity, I think that is a barrier for a lot of people. And Lisa brought up last time that looking into the way that perhaps commissions work in the future would be short bursts of, you know, focusing, like laser focus on maybe one or two items in a short burst to be able to complete them. So it's less of a commitment. And I know that sounds wild because, you know, we want people to be able to commit to their community, but some folks can't. And I think that that's a great way to get people who can commit for a short amount of time. And I think that using the village manager search as a platform for that, I mean, we had a diverse group of people come out for that, a diverse group of age ranges, backgrounds, and it was because there was the ability to say, okay, I can commit to a few weeks during this time. I can commit to this time of day. But if it would have been a long-term thing, I think we would have had fewer people reach out. So I think that is something that is important to take a look at, especially if we want to have more people coming to us to say we want to participate. And I would say that is one of the things that a lot of the people who come out and or who are tapped are doing a lot of other things in town too. So I think the capacity piece is important to keep in mind.
Okay, John, are you here to comment on this?
Yes. Sure. I guess the main thing that I would add that hasn't been stated is the credibility issue with a manager's advisory committee. That you know, nothing against you, just way, but the manager's office has, I think, historically been seen as not exactly like a check on the police department, or you know, independent from, you know, the staff, you know, and you get, and I mean, if I was in your position, I don't know if I would want I mean, you know, you could certainly like say, oh, well, we're just dealing with like these sorts of things, but not like everything. But you know, you definitely wouldn't want to take like everything on, because you wouldn't want to be sort of put in the middle of having to mediate what are often sort of like political questions really for the elected representatives to decide, because you know that's an awkward position to be in as the village manager, I think. So yeah, I guess that's the main thing that probably hasn't already been said. I have applied for the Justice System Commission, and you know, I hope it gets up and going. I didn't realize that it was having such trouble recruiting. I'll try to get the word out. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so do we bring this back to the next meeting? Are we ready to move forward with an idea?
I mean, if it were up to me, which I guess I'm one of several people, I would wait until we have more meat on what the areas that we want to be starting to work on with the police department before we start bringing people in for anything, which would probably be actually waiting until next year, probably. So.
Although that doesn't sound like the timeline that we discussed on our first old business. I mean, I thought we were starting to prioritize and put together a strategic plan. I mean, that sounds like getting kind of meaty to me. So I guess the question is that all work that's done by the village team and council, and then we push it out to citizens, or are we getting citizens engaged on the front end?
Well, I mean, I thought we were talking about creating some kind of draft plan, that then we would have a community meeting, invite people to come to the meeting to respond, and then that would sort of be energizing the discussion, and then sort of move from there. I don't know. Frankly, as the time gets this late, I'm noticing my brain is sort of.
I think it's possible that as the results in the prioritization of the police assessment combined with an update on things that are already going on and a community meeting, that it's likely that it will enliven some interest in the commission. Maybe more people will come forward and say they want to participate, and we can just press forward and get the commission going. And by then it will be we'll have more capacity to do it. I think we should just keep pushing forward.
Okay, except for that council liaison. And to me, starting a commission where we don't have somebody dedicated long-term.
But that'll probably be November or even December before that happens. So I mean, again, it's not up to me either, but what I'm thinking is, I mean, maybe there could be an advisory meeting or the community meeting that's citizen engagement. And from that, maybe, you know, we would identify more people, or we could notice a meeting that all the council didn't have to come to, and invite the people who have applied and indicated they might be interested, get their input, informally, not sworn into the commission. You know, I mean, that's a way, like a little bit of a soft start that could get it going. I mean, it's good, we'll have, I mean, that's what I think.
Right.
I mean, or there's that separate group that has been framed as an advisory to the chief, and that's in the assessment. And that's a different kind of a body than a commission. The role is entirely different, but it is a sounding board of community input. Different, though. So, I don't know.
Okay, Kanetta?
I wonder if it could start as the manager's advisory board, and that's kind of the umbrella that holds the offshoot, which would be generating the Justice System Commission. And then also, I would say that could be the umbrella that creates the offshoot for the citizens' complaints and the work there. I think that especially if you start off there, maybe both of those things can develop differently but aligned.
Right.
That's just a thought.
Okay, Kevin?
I've been resisting saying anything. So the commission exists. You know, we're not setting up a commission. It exists. There's just nobody, there's not enough people for it to serve. So by sort of definition, it's on hiatus for now. I think we focus on what's in front of us, you know, the results of the assessment, you know, get those things going. Perhaps, I feel like we'd be like carnival barkers, you know, doing a public meeting to say, gosh, is there anybody that wants to serve on this? You know, it is quite likely. So what we are defining is there was a task force that had a particular subject in mind, particular set of tasks, a particular shelf life. They did a bunch of work and then they stood down. I'm not saying at this point, don't have the commission, because it does exist. We just don't have anybody to serve on it right now. What we are doing with another commission that's on hiatus is that we have a manager's advisory board working on that. So whatever the group is called, you know, whether it's, you know, the chief's advisory, if that thing by itself comes out of the review of the assessment, that's the thing we should do, we do that. You know, I'm just saying we move forward. You know, really, you know, what we're hearing, this is great, because we all want to do a good job. We all want to be effective. We don't want to get to the point where we become ineffective. And something that maybe was just mentioned in a nuanced manner a little while ago is when you have a brand-new commission that's just getting started off, you know, you're not just a liaison, you're super liaison, because you are almost by definition, again, leading where we're not supposed to be in a leadership role, but it will have to be that way as it's going on. So, you know, for anybody's listening, we're not even talking about, you know, taking on another commission. We're talking about running a commission, you know, for a period of time. So it is a heavy lift, but I think there's a natural order of things. Let's just start the work. We want to get something done. In terms of commission assignments, you know, we are transitioning leadership here on council. So what folks do, you know, in the medium term won't be decided until after the election, quite honestly. I don't know that a whole lot else is going to change between now and then. So I would just say, you know, let's handle the tasks that are right in front of us. Work is getting done. So in other words, what problem are we trying to solve? We will solve some problems if we just work with, you know, the results of the assessment. I think we're moving the ball forward then. And I think maybe, you know, we're not intentionally waiting until after the elections, but, you know, we could potentially be a different group, well, we will be a different group of people.
Right.
In a few months. So, you know, who does what will change as a result.
Well, I think, you know, work is getting done, but also the village team is, you know, I mean, they have capacity issues just like us. But I would also think we need to think about how it's done. And I guess that's where, like I said, I don't want to lose the opportunity for citizen feedback. But I think we had a good discussion. I've heard enough to think that we should at least put together a one-pager about what this would look like. Kanetta, I'd like you to help me brainstorm that, and then Josue, we will pull you in as well.
Okay.
So we'll come back on the 7th. We'll have a one-pager that council can look at and decide what direction we want to go. Is that okay? I mean, I heard 3 council members say that they're interested in the advisory board on some level, and especially the council member that's been working on this the most, Kanetta. Okay.
And then what is the immediate goal of this advisory board?
To help implement our village system goals, which what's right in front of us now is the assessment. And then through our prioritization process, we're going to direct that work. Okay. But we'll see. I mean, we'll talk about it, and if we don't move forward, we're making a decision. Okay. House Bill 229, Kevin, this is a great bill.
Thank you. It's a
Yeah.
good bill, and the draft resolution, my first time out the gate. Thank you, Judy, for pushing me to do the work. I feel like I want to pretend like I'm the council president and say, Judy, can you read that in full?
We're almost there.
Okay, maybe next time. So, in October of 2018, I started looking around and reading information relative to, quite honestly, Section 8 vouchers. You know, the broader discussion is source of income for rental properties. I started writing the Ohio Municipal League, asking the question, you know, does the state allow us as a municipality, you know, to enact ordinances that could be backed up by the Ohio Revised Code that says, hey, if somebody shows up with a voucher, you have to accept it. Or maybe another way I envisioned it is, hey, Mr. Landlord, you've got 10 properties, 20% of them you have to accept. Thank you, Judy. 20, some percentage of them you have to accept Section 8 vouchers. Well, so as it turns out, there's some bill that popped up. And so Judy's got the bill up on the screen. If you're looking through your digital packets, you can start on page 74 of the packet, and that's the beginning of the bill. It's one of the primary sponsor is Miller Upchurch. He's out of the Cleveland area, and I've even written him to ask, you know, what was his motivation, you know, for sponsoring this bill. Haven't gotten a response. You know, I can imagine that it's because I was writing the Ohio Municipal League. I don't know if that's the case. But in short, and because it is late, and we'll talk about this more in detail, you know, the bill that's being considered by the Ohio House of Representatives is currently in the Commerce and Labor Committee. They published an agenda for this week. It's not being discussed this week, so I'll continue to check the agenda to see when they bring it up and do hearings on the bill. But what the bill does is it modifies what it says right there, to amend section 41.2.01 and .02 of the revised code to prohibit discrimination in rental housing based on lawful source of income. I'm just trying to look at my notes so we can just jump down through things. So that's where it begins. Then if we go to I think lines 35, it's got lines along the side, so lines 35 through 37. It looks like they're different now, but, well, yeah, unlawful discriminatory practice in section 4112.01 is mainly definitions. So that's the section we're in now, just the definitions. So it says unlawful discriminatory practice means any act prohibited by section this, that, and the other of the revised code. Then if we jump down the pages or lines 142 through 147, this is the Cliff Notes version of this very large bill. You'll recognize the language in this section of the bill is also in the resolution. It defines lawful source of income as, you know, these various mechanisms that exist to help make lives better. So then we'll jump down again quickly to line 167. And that's where section .02 begins. We've had the definitions, so now we're talking about what things are unlawful. And so real quickly, just jump on down to lines 504 to 522. And again, in summary, as we scroll down, we're just talking about making it illegal for a landlord to turn down someone's Section 8 or some other housing assistance voucher. And it's way down there, so I'm scrolling. And so, again, and just wanted to highlight these so they're easy to find because they're underlined. So these are the changes to those sections of the Ohio Revised Code. Again, it defines what lawful source of income is, and then it just talks about you can't do it. You can't do this, you can't do that. And you all can read the details, and again, because it's late, I won't read through all of them now, but effectively, it would become illegal if this law is passed for landlords to do anything that could be considered discriminating against folks who want to rent a property based on their lawful source of income. We've also asked that, as the bottom of the resolution reads, we've asked that this be sent to our representatives. I want to highlight something, certainly Mr. Perales is somebody we want to go to, but even though Bill Dean is not our representative, Bill Dean is the vice chair of the Commerce and Labor Committee. So he's a local guy, and right now, he's vice chair of a committee that has this bill in committee right now. And they have yet to go through, the various readings of it in the various hearings. So again, I'd just like for us to go through the steps on our end, pass this resolution, get our notice of our support to our representatives. Maybe after it passes, that might lead to our doing some ordinance changes on our end to sort of echo, what the state is saying. Fact of the matter is, folks that live and work, or that work and want to live in Yellow Springs often would be eligible for housing vouchers, but they, based on anecdotal data, they don't tend to follow through with that because they have a negative experience. They've had a negative experience. We've seen information about this, and Brian even allowed a couple weeks ago that he's experienced that. So that is it. That's the Cliff Notes version. I think I should get an award for sticking to my 5 minutes. So again, I just wanted to go through some of the highlights of the bill to show what's being changed and what the state is hopefully going to pass as strengthen those the laws regarding discrimination.
Right. I think it looks great. I'm guessing that this is something that this council would support, and I think we should bring a resolution back for the next meeting. I will say, you're not going to get any traction with Bill Dean. But we should send it to Senator Hackett, because ultimately this would have to be passed on the Senate side. One thing I do notice about the bill is it's all Democrats, and these are amazing representatives, very smart, but I mean, for this to really move, I would suggest call Rick Perales up and tell him we want him to co-sponsor.
Okay.
He's done it before. So, okay, great. Thanks for putting this together.
Great.
Thank you, Judy. So I think we're in agreement, bring it back next time? Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right, Active Transportation Committee, this is pretty straightforward. We have an active transportation plan that needs support to implement, and this is not just around temporary transportation programs. This is about programming for the trail. It's about education. It's about seeking grants, you name it. We have an amazing group of experts on active transportation in the village, and many of you may remember we had the Yellow Springs Active Transportation Committee that got us the grant to do the plan, got us the Safe Routes to School grant. I mean, it's an amazing group, and this kind of gets back to my, for this to work, I'm proposing that it's part of Planning Commission, because I want there to be more syncing up between Planning Commission and the Active Transportation Plan. And secondly, that we do that retail outreach. So people like Chris Bongiorno, who took the lead on Safe Routes to School, and he's a transportation planner. Eric Oberg with Rails to Trails, he's been doing that for 14 years. Gary Zaremski, that's ready to think about bike parking. We've got Barbara Mann, who was really involved representing the senior population, and she also uses a mobility device. Eric Clark is asked to be a part of it. So I think we've got some solid people. If this proposal looks good, then at the next meeting, I'll highlight who I think should be part of this group, which doesn't mean that other people can't jump in. And in fact, I've had a few other citizens reach out about this group, but we're not gonna have any problems populating it. And I think we need this expertise, to also talk about things that Dan and Matthew Kirk and others have raised as well, just processing those different perspectives. So.
I agree.
So, the group that did the things you just talked about, got
Yes.
the grant, Safe Routes to School, got the grant for the plan, that was a temporary group, and then they disbanded, but mostly the people you're thinking about being in this would be at least some of those people?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, part of it was that because it was ad hoc, Chris Bongiorno just kind of ran out of, got too busy to convene it.
And you were also suggesting that the council liaison for planning commission be the liaison to the commission, or the committee.
That would be great. Alternatively, I'm willing to fill that spot. So depending on, your capacity, we can talk about that. And the other thing that Josue brought up, which is an excellent idea, and Judy as well, is Denise Swinger being ex officio. So she hears it, she brings it back to planning commission, and we have a nice flow. Yep.
We also have interest from the planning commission. At the last meeting, they expressed an interest of having representation in the active transportation committee.
Yeah. So in this way, the active transportation committee would be under planning commission?
Yes.
A committee of planning
Right,
commission?
right. Which is how the bike enhancement committee was structured as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it works, I'm good with it.
cool. All right, we'll keep it moving forward then. All right.
Everyone else?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, no new business, managers report.
All right. I'll start with the hot topic, active transportation plan. I think we got a good overview of what we're proposing, and this is to test a recommendation of the temporary converting South Walnut Street to one-way from Short Street to Limestone Street. Add pull-in diagonal parking along Walnut Street. We're looking at gaining a net gain of 13 spots for a total of 30 parking spots. One thing to note on the traffic change is that traffic must make a right turn at Limestone Street off Walnut. In terms of a timeline, didn't include it in the report, but in speaking with various individuals and Brian and members of our team, that we're looking to change the timeline on when we execute this proposal. So at this point, we're looking at a mid-October to mid-November execution timeframe. So this will take place after the street fair. This will give us more time to plan our logistics and also communicate our plan to our residents. So that's as related to Walnut Street. We're moving forward with the recommendation to try out the Short Street initiative.
And let me just add something there. So I saw Ashley Mansion from US Bank on Saturday, and she highlighted that if part of the reason that we're looking at Short Street is to add more bike parking, which it is, that they would be open to potentially, looking at some of their property housing that bike parking.
Oh, excellent.
So I told her, yes, we are definitely interested. She's got to talk to her corporate folks, but I thought that was really exciting.
So are there going to be, was the math done on the number of additional spaces, or was that part of the consideration for Short Street in terms of parking spaces? Or is it just starting with?
We did some assessment in terms of how many parking spots we have now and what it would mean under a new initiative. In terms of what will encourage the decision to try out Short Street is that we're already gonna try something significant on Walnut Street, and there's this adjacent area, being Short Street, that was proposed to be closed off, that we could try an alternative to that, and that is converting it to one-way street and creating additional parking for bicycle parking and whatnot. This also allows us to address this traffic flow. If you're removing the traffic flow from traveling towards the brewery, if you recall, there were folks talking about this would affect their travel plans to get to the brewery from that side of town. By having one-way street down on Short Street, it allows folks to get back onto Walnut and make it across town. Not that those two individuals are necessarily the deciding factor, but that's something that we thought about in terms of a traffic flow that would allow us to, one, test out an alternative idea for Short Street, and also think about that traffic pattern that would be affected by just having Walnut be one-way street down.
Yeah.
Then,
Well, I guess I'd want to be careful of is to tie the two together so much that we don't consider what it will be, for example, to, if you just do the Walnut and don't do anything to Short, I still have that as an alternate route. But then
You still
also-
have that, yeah?
Yeah, but I can also use it going south
Yeah,
on
so
Walnut.
it's two-way.
If you leave it two-way.
Yes.
You know, so I think, we would, for those folks that would not be in favor of this, I think we would start off by doing less harm by just doing the Walnut and not doing anything with Short Street in the first pass.
Yes, except that, if you're forcing traffic on Walnut Street to only turn right, then you will push a lot of traffic into Short Street. And a lot of folks, one of the challenges of that Walnut Street and Limestone intersection is folks turn left onto Limestone to turn left again onto Xenia. You would now move that problem down to Short Street because you will push all that traffic onto Short Street. To make a left from Walnut onto Short Street to make a left onto Xenia Avenue.
So maybe I'm confused then. What way is Short going to be one way then?
One way from Xenia to Walnut.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, I hear what you're saying.
And I thought about this, what is the value that you gain by adding Short Street to this initiative? I think there's something to be learned there from that alternative versus shutting down Short Street altogether. That's the recommendation. And if we're already gonna try something out that's significant as it is on Walnut, we could, the marginal cost of trying out Short Street is reduced because you're already doing something on Walnut. Versus just trying something new on Short Street.
Right.
And I get your point, is it risk, is it enough, what's the risk with trying both out at the same time? Would we learn that this initiative is entirely a terrible idea? Would it be just because it's Walnut or because we added Short Street to it, or it was just Short Street, the effect of making a modification to Short Street?
Right. And
how do you adjust for that input, whether that's through the observations or the surveys, or other data points? I get it, and that's a real concern, and I think that, part of this is a learning experience, right? We'll learn what the traffic change in the pattern is, what's that feedback from residents. So yeah, I don't know what to say about the risk that's associated with trying Short Street. I think there's some of it certainly, but I don't think that we'll know until we try it.
Okay. Well, I'm game for doing it temporarily, but I know there's been, as we all know, there's been concerns expressed about a lot of parts to it, but one in particular I just heard about is the number of parking spaces that would be lost.
But we're not losing parking spaces. So we have 12 parking spaces there as it is now in the current configuration. We ran the numbers and we think we can get 14, 15 parking spaces out of Short Street and some bicycle parking.
Okay.
So we're not losing parking, at least.
And that's diagonal, is it
Diagonal parking, correct, diagonal parking, so.
Okay.
we
And
don't
we
lose-
decided not to try back in for now.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I guess the other thing that we need to think about, Kevin, is do we continue to prioritize parking and motorized transportation, and not balance active transportation? And I don't know, and what Mary Ann said earlier about we can definitely be more walkable in this town, so.
Right.
But, I appreciate that we've thought about the parking. I think honestly, there's just been a lot of misunderstanding and strong reactions that, part of that is we're always continuing our communication process from the village to the community too. So.
Yes.
And I trust that we're prioritizing lots of handicap parking spots. There was one night where we were talking about parking. There was a lot of people from the community that were saying how, well, they've never had any problems parking and they just walk everywhere. And these were people of all ages, but they were all very fit and able to walk, didn't use assistive devices. You know, I mean, the whole conversation had the privilege of being able to walk. And, I really think that if we are going to have more parking spaces, that we should somehow find a way to have those be set aside, a good percentage of them, for people who don't have that privilege.
Yes, and in this initiative, at least with Short Street, we would make the first parking spot in front of US Bank a handicap parking spot, and the first one on Short Street handicap, so that we can create spaces for individuals. Okay. All right, in the report, you'll see an investment committee update. Recently, the investment committee met to review the performance of the Village Yellow Springs investment portfolio, the investment policy, and to reassess our investment strategy to ensure the investment management of village funds are effective, judicious, and fall within the parameters of responsibility and authority granted to the committee by the Village Council and the State of Ohio. The committee proposes to secure the services of Bond Tech Inc. to assist the committee in the management of funds. The expense is estimated to be at $3,600 and is expected to be covered by the additional investment revenue that we anticipate. Below are the charts indicating the performance of our investment funds from 2014 through 2019. If you'll see, one of the questions that came up, how is it that, where's our investment revenue coming from? So in the table in your package, you'll see the columns broken out by year. So you'll have 5 years of data plus the current year-to-date data for 2019. That's highlighted in yellow because we're not through the entire year. So we'll still have a few months left in the year to account for additional revenue that we expect. In a nutshell, I'll give you the highlights. In 2014, we had $1,594,905 in total investment funds. We received a total investment revenue of $3,182. In 2015, our investment revenue was very similar to 2014. That was in the amount of $3,215.66, and our total investment fund was very similar to 2014 in the amount of $1,598,121. In 2016, those numbers carry forward, they're very similar, except that we had some deposits made into investment, and that increased our investment revenue to $7,330.81, bringing our total investment fund balance to $2,996.58.45. In 2017, our investment revenue totaled $34,409.50, and bringing in the total investment fund balance included a transfer into the investment fund totaling $744,000, bringing our total investment fund balance to $3,754,467.75. 2018, you see a pattern here of this, both the total investment fund balance increasing, likewise with our investment revenue increasing. And in 2018, we've seen our best year so far, as at least of what we're tracking in this sheet, where we had $96,670.25. We had a total transfer of $2.5 million deposited into our total investment fund balance, bringing our total investment to $6,370,138. Now, for 2019, being a partial year, we've received $121,115 and 15 cents in investment revenue. We transferred deposit into investments a total of $750, bringing our total investments to $7,241,253.15. And in that, also in this table, you'll see the investment revenue as a percentage of the balance, and this is a blend percentage. Part of it is because of there's 4 different fund balance accounts, and the performance is the average of all those funds. Any question on that table so far? Okay, I've included 2 additional charts that visualize this performance, and that's the total investment balance. That has 3 columns. The blue column is your investment beginning balance, and then it adds on to the transfer balance. That's that gray shaded area, and then the top of it is that investment revenue. That's in orange. So that shows you visually the proportions of those funds. And the final chart you see there is just looking at investment revenue with a reference to investment revenue as a percentage of balance.
So let me jump in there. One of the things that you'll notice from that last graph is that returns are starting to slow down. And so one reason that the investment committee is recommending Bondtech is as a way to maintain where we're at. So by having somebody that understands investments and also knows what governments can do to keep us in compliance, we believe we can at least maintain that, if not continue to grow. So I definitely support that idea.
Thank you, Brian. And the market is changing. The feds have reduced rates. That's going to affect the Star Ohio Star Plus performance. And we're looking to find other opportunities that are still ensure the safety of our funds and staying within the authority that we have from council and the state of Ohio to continue to have good returns on our investment funds.
Yeah, well, we certainly have made progress over the last couple of years, both in putting money in and getting better.
It's
Right,
pretty
increasing return.
amazing, yeah. Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, I do think the time is right. We've talked about this, working with an investment professional in the past. And there's been more than one committee. There's a finance advisory committee that really spearheaded this group and, looking at a lot of the financial aspects. And so I'm really excited to see this rate of return. I feel like, we're creating value where, we were getting so little. So I think it's good. I like the idea of diversification. And I'm glad that we're working with someone who we know is really an expert on walking that line between, making very prudent decisions and doing things that are legal in every way, but also can get us the best rate of return. And I also really want to acknowledge Colleen Harris, our finance director, because she's engaged with this work in a very thoughtful way and has been very central to this. So I really want to recognize her.
Excellent.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
All right, any questions? So, oh yeah, Megan, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I'm just curious where the extra $4.5 million came, that was added to the fund over the last 5 years.
Yes. We've kept a lot of cash in our checking account and our operating account, and a lot of these transfers have been moving cash that we've held in that checking account over to investments.
So it's been about the same amount of money.
Moving it.
Right, yes.
Yeah, and basically, the bank account was, in those days, costing us. We weren't earning anything on our millions. The other thing about Star Ohio and Star Plus is you can get that money into your checking account in a day. So that was a big part of moving that money to where it could actually earn something. And also Colleen and Josue have done a good job of talking to US Bank about giving us a better rate on their services, so.
And some of that discussion, we discovered that the way that we kept a free account at US Bank was by keeping large balances. Now, we're trying to figure out what's the right balance so that we don't pay any fees, and we discover there's a gap, a difference there. So whatever we could move over there while still meeting cash requirements, operating cash requirements of our operations, we're looking to move what we can over to investment so that we get some return on that money.
Okay, so I think one thing is, we need to make a decision about whether we agree with the recommendation to move forward with, an investment consultant. Everybody, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
A particular
Well, yeah, Bond Tech is.
Bond Tech.
Yeah. Okay, so
Okay.
then I guess you've got permission to move forward with
All
that?
right, excellent, thank you.
Good.
All right, an update on police assessment, I'll touch on this brief because we discussed it earlier. We'll look to, I met with police chief to discuss next steps regarding the police assessment and collect feedback from the police department. We'll continue that feedback collection from the team, and we'll bring an outline at the October 7th meeting on next steps. You might have noticed some progress on both parking lots. The Railroad Street is complete. The one on Bryan Center parking, the painting is complete. You notice the new white lines. We're able to fit 26 parking spots with the markings on it. We can squeeze in an additional 3 right down the middle to make it a bit tight, but if we need to add 3 more, we have space for 3 more. And we'll work on those donation boxes, Brian. I'll skip over the pool rates, we've passed that. I also want to make reference on the conversation regarding law enforcement and prosecution in Village of Yellow Springs. We devoted a lot of time the last 2 weeks to follow up on the concerns of council and concerns of residents, whether are we using our resources appropriately? And from Ron, and I gather from the conversation, we're doing very good with our current setup. And we'll continue to explore all the options available to us. But as initial check-in, there isn't something that needs to change right away, or something we haven't addressed up front as a result of the recent incidents. But that continues to be a work in progress. All right, we'll have 2 budget sessions coming up, September 27th and September 28th. We'll be reviewing the 4 different categories of our funds, budget categories. And that's it. Any questions?
Yes.
Sorry, before you start, I do have one more announcement. I want to congratulate and recognize Johnny Burns for getting us an award recently. This is it's the awards for his contributions to the water distribution industry, and I'm looking for the exact award. It's called the Operator Meritorious Distribution. So thank you, Johnny, for all your work on public works and water distribution.
Yeah, Johnny's getting good at those photo ops.
Yeah. You have to have your picture up all around.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yes. Last week, there was a request from Steve Deal, who I noticed was here and then left, about North Walnut Street traffic. Have you?
Yes, we actually had we've had a couple email exchanges and some conversation around what would be the possible solutions to it. One of them is one of the things Steve Deal talked about in his letter is having just one lane dedicated to parking. And we looked at that and looked at it to the reference he made to the 2013 parking setup. Chief Brian Carlson spoke with the fire department about this idea of having parking just on one side. And that seems like a viable option. Whether that is temporarily, such as a rush hour setup, or an event configuration that when there's high traffic areas, there will be no parking on one side. So we are following up on that parking initiative, and we are looking at the other suggestions of traffic calming activities in the airport. So we'll provide a more detailed response at the next council meeting, but thank you for asking. We did look into it. We're following up, and it's a pending item for us. Did I miss anything, Brian? Or Johnny?
We have a little bit of planning already in the works. Once some of the pipeline's done, we are going to have the no parking from a certain home up to Walnut Street, or Dayton Street, but we really need to address the rest of Walnut. It narrows, kind of funnels in, and we still have issues.
Okay. Judy?
Nothing?
All right. Any highlights
Yeah.
on boards and commissions?
I will be brief. Planning Commission had a number of interesting things come up. And my understanding from Planning Commission is that the commission wants to be involved in, I guess I would say, vetting the projects that come up through the active transportation plan. And if the new committee is then a subcommittee of Planning Commission, that seems like that would be a way of doing that. The request for conditional use of having a home business elicited a number of things that I wanted to bring to the attention of council. One is that I think a lot of community members don't know what's in the zoning code. For example, they don't know that you can actually have a small home business in your home. That was like new to some people. Another thing is that clearly neighbors have trouble talking to each other about problems that they're having with each other. And I understand it because I do too. And that is a real issue. And whether it's HRC wants to take something on like that or the mediation program, I mean, it's not something for council to do, but I do think it is an issue and I think it impacts the quality of life. The other thing that came up was, in this case, the home business is a cooperative. It's several people. And while there would only be 2 people at a time, which would meet the zoning, there are actually 5 people, I guess, maybe as part of the cooperative. So I think it's an example of, we always have to stay up on top of new developments, whether they're new business forms or organizational forms, so that our zoning is meeting the spirit of the law and changing the letter of the law as it needs to be. Because clearly, it was my sense that if you have the person who lives there and then you have one of the teachers there, that's 2 people. You know, it's not a huge business, which I think was the spirit of the law. And another instance of that, I think, is one of the issues that's coming up with the community land trust housing. And I am realizing, I realized, I guess, today, that our zoning code needs to mesh with how community land trust home ownership works, and it doesn't right now. And given that community land trust was chosen as a mechanism for having permanently affordable housing, it behooves us to start looking through the zoning code to look at where do we need to change our zoning? I mean, Home Inc. needs to do some things too, I think, but I think that that's one of the problems that's been happening. So that is all that I have to say about that.
Yeah. There was some interesting stuff in your report.
Mhm, yeah.
Anything else?
Well, this is not a commission deal, but I didn't, and nor did I know whether Josue was going to have it in his manager's report, but Casey Alt and the folks downstairs, and it's in our packet, right?
Yes, I can speak to that.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
as you know, last council meeting, we had a conversation about the utility roundup program. And we had a brief conversation about what to do with the opt-out and whatnot, and we indicated that we had embarked on some initiatives that we thought would yield good results. And they did. If you turn to your package on the utility roundup report, you will see that we had a significant increase in our participation rate. Just for the month of August, we had 52 new member signups. That brings our total participation percentage to 19%. So that's a 3% increase from the last month. So that, to me, it's a clear indication that the mailer worked. That was the activity in the month of August. So at least those initial projections are working, and so we're moving in the right direction with our utility roundup program. Also, as a reporting of that, we approved 3 applications for assistance totaling $480.70. and we brought in $522.52. So, no, we're giving out as we're bringing in, so
Yeah.
we're helping folks out. Now, any questions on that?
Thank you, it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
We'll also have a Thirsty Thursday event at the Yellow Springs Brewery on the 26th of this month, so there's a way that you can contribute to the program while also doing something you enjoy, if you enjoy.
Well, you don't have to drink, you can give.
No, you can give, exactly. You can
Just
show up and give.
come
Yeah,
up.
We're not encouraging anything.
That's right.
Right. Also included in the report is the monthly financial report. You'll see that, you'll see the totals of revenue versus expensive, and there's a balance of those two, and we're bringing in more money than we're spending.
Great.
Always good.
Not to say that that may be the trend for the year, but, you know, the expenses come up.
Yep,
But we hope to stay within the budget.
So that's your disclaimer. It's good now.
It's good for this month of August.
Okay, so,
Oh, sorry, one more thing. Up on your screen is the sign that was proposed by our team in terms of directions for the site. Have you had any chance to consider any additions to it, or we good to go? I know that one of the things I want to point out is Mary Ann McQueen had pointed out vetting the names, shaping our future. If there's any thought about the tagline. It also happens to be a very similar tagline to our comprehensive land use plan, which says, "Help shape our future."
How about that?
Was this in the packet?
No, this was
This
in
is
your
from
last packet.
Okay,
yes.
so this is not an updated
No.
version. Has council made any, given
No,
any
I mean, I
feedback?
would be fine with not having a tagline, but it's not a critical.
I'm not in a creative space right now.
Yeah,
To do design stuff.
Okay.
I'm gonna say, like, especially given where we're at, that, and I know I promised we'd decide tonight, but, I mean, I think at this point, give your feedback to Johnny and Josue this week, and then let's get a final mock-up on October 7th.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
No? Okay.
He's wanting to start painting tomorrow. We're done reading meters, so I have like a 10-day period that he's not reading meters. October 7th, he's gonna be reading meters October 1st.
Okay.
So if I can just get the standard stuff, you know, I know, no tagline, he can at least start on that. He can do the
I think we're good with everything except just some of the, like, welcoming community and what we're gonna put in. So, I mean, I don't think there's a problem with the design,
Okay.
so.
Didn't folks want to flip some of the names of
They
what's
did, I
listed?
think.
You wanted to put the police department
did.
first, right?
Oh, well,
Was that-
oh, no, they didn't.
Right.
No, this is the
This
same
isn't
one
model.
from last
Oh,
week.
okay.
Right, so just, raise. But
Okay.
they're all movable, are they
Right,
not?
no,
Yes,
yes.
they're all in there. They'll be solid.
Hmm.
We can take sign apart to move them, but they're, once they go in, they're in.
Can you see?
Okay, well,
this
so
is
the-
a flaw?
Letter in the morning, so.
So I think we're good with the overall structure. All right, let's get a mock-up of the proposed order
Okay.
of the different offices based on the last discussion, and send that around to council, and then ASAP, if anybody has any feedback, shoot it, and.
So just
we'll do it.
one thing, Johnny, you said, it's troublesome to move the sign, but it's possible. I mean, if you had to, if,
I feel like in there.
I think it's a design flaw that you can't, I mean, I think you gotta have something on the side where you can lock them in and slide them in and out, but it's just my imagination that you'd be able to do that. But I like the sign as it is, just, make it.
Well, I think we're close, so, okay.
All right, we'll mock it up, send it out in the next couple of days, and get your feedback.
Okay. Future agenda items? Okay. Well, you're in agenda planning, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I will be absent on October 21st.
Okay. Okay.
Did we set up a date, a permanent time for agenda planning?
We've been doing Fridays and they're occasionally Monday mornings.
I know Judy had suggested it, which
Yeah.
is, we didn't do.
Maybe we'll talk about it again in agenda planning.
Oh, yeah,
Set that up.
it can be an ongoing agenda.
There you go. All right, motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
I bet yours is secure.
No.
Did you want this?
I have one. Health babysitter hospital.
Man.
So now if I have a health babysitter hospital again, this time it was screening.
Forgot to bring my stop talking cards. So remind me to stop talking.
I had been carrying one for a
Aren't they
while.
funny?
FYI, this week, I'm gonna be in Milwaukee and North Dakota, so I'll have to call in.
They have a lot of those dry, they call those